Chapter 563. The most popular item in the northern borderline this year was the colored glass of the Heavenly Palace. What was the colored glass of the Heavenly Palace? To put it bluntly, it was glass with an opaque color and impurities that glowed with colorful light. Because Gu Xian fabricated a noble origin for the glass, saying that the glass was a celestial item that descended with a golden phoenix, and every piece was beautiful, the glass had another noble name, colored glass of the Heavenly Palace, implying that it was a treasure from the Heavenly Palace. The first lady to buy the colored glass of the Heavenly Palace became the focus of the circle of noblewomen in the northern borderline. Wherever she went, other people's eyes followed her. They were all fascinated by the dragon and phoenix hairpins on her temples. She also became the object of jealousy of many noble ladies. Those noble ladies kept urging their servants to ask for information from the treasure house. They insisted on getting the same or even better glass hairpins. The hairpin was translucent, with a dragon and a phoenix entwined together. The scales of the dragon and the feathers of the phoenix were fine and lifelike. The phoenix spread its wings as if it was about to fly, and the handsome dragon looked like it was about to soar to the ninth heaven. A string of transparent beads was held in the mouth of the phoenix and the dragon, which was shining brightly under the light. Women could not resist such beautiful and shiny things, but there was no news from the treasure house. Facing so many jealous and hateful gazes, the lady enjoyed it very much. Thanks to her free publicity, the colored glass of the Heavenly Palace quickly became popular in the circle of noblewomen in the northern borderline. As a businessman, Gu Xian whetted everyone's appetite, and then found an opportunity to launch new glass products. The glass tea sets sold very well, but the most popular was the jewelry, and each piece sold at a very high price. In the past year, Gu Xian's treasure house had sold hundreds of pieces, and the profits were so great that it made people jealous. The merchants of the northern borderline also wanted to make this money, but they had no way to get such good things, and could only watch Gu Xian make money. It could be said that in the past year, the glass had become the symbol of the status of the nobles in the northern borderline. Every family had at least one set, and they could not show their generosity at all. Which noblewoman did not wear one or two pieces of glass jewelry seemed to be too ashamed to go out and not dare to entertain guests. Among them, the most generous noblewoman was Wu Liba's wife. Her family ran a business, and her husband was a wise man whom the king of the northern borderline relied heavily on. Every time the treasure house had a new product, she was always the first to get the news and contributed a lot of money. Among all the noblewomen of the northern borderline, she was the only one who had collected several sets of glass jewelry. Every time she went out to a banquet, she attracted the attention of most people. Full of heroic spirit. As the saying went, follow the example of your superiors. This saying was not only applicable in Dongqing, but also in the north borderline. Wu Liba's wife had a very high status in the circle of aristocratic ladies. They admired these colored glass of the Heavenly Palace. Naturally, those aristocratic ladies with slightly lower status also coveted them. However, they were not as wealthy as the other ladies. By the time they received news that the treasure house was stocking up, the items had already been bought. Things that couldn't be bought even if one had money could better reflect one's noble status. In order to satisfy the needs of these noble ladies, Gu Xian smiled bitterly and agreed to help them search. Only then did they give up. They waited, and waited, they waited anxiously, and finally, the news from the treasure house came. This was the largest in history. There were a total of 20 sets of colored glass of the Heavenly Palace jewelry that were in relatively perfect condition. This news caused waves of ripples in the circle of aristocratic ladies of the north borderline. The treasure house was filled with carriages and servants from various mansions. Wu Liba's wife was still the vanguard. She generously spent 670,000 strings of coins to buy 2 of the most gorgeous and beautiful jewelry sets. The other ladies wanted to fight for it, but they weighed their own family assets. No matter what, they couldn't compare to the family's business. Therefore, they could only settle for the next best thing, which was to buy other jewelry. The treasure house was very discerning and respectfully offered a set. It was sent to the imperial harem of the north borderline and given to the most honorable woman. The Empress was also very interesting. After receiving it, she dressed up and held a banquet to show off. For a time, from the top to the bottom, the aristocratic families of the north borderline valued the colored glass of the heavenly palace. The only fly in the ointment was that this thing was fragile and fragile. But thinking about it, even fine jade would shatter if it fell to the ground. The colored glass of the heavenly palace should also be a jade stone from the sky. It was normal for it to shatter accidentally. Under such a trend, many businessmen coveted this thing to the extreme. They wanted nothing more than to replace the treasure house. The colored glass of the heavenly palace, in the black market of the north borderline, was even more priceless. Doing business could easily earn millions of strings of coins. Who wouldn't be envious? Soon, their opportunity came. They used money to try to bribe the servants and stewards of the treasure house. After spending money and beauties, they finally relented after nearly a year. What? The head of a business in the north borderline trembled. The wine in his hand almost spilled. He said in surprise, the number of pieces of the colored glass of the heavenly palace unearthed in May County wasn't just over 200, but over 2,000? Most of them are in the hands of that old fox, Wuxia. The steward of the treasure house, who had been instigated to defect, nodded, but immediately revealed a resentful expression. That Wuxia has made a lot of money, but he's very greedy. He only cares about filling his own pockets and doesn't care about my old partner at all. This time, if it weren't for your kindness, I'm afraid that my family would have been ruined. The steward of the treasure house sighed with a bitter expression. The head of the business in the north borderline snickered in his heart. If he hadn't used a scheme to frame the steward's family, causing him to owe a huge debt, this fat fish probably wouldn't have taken the bait, and he wouldn't have been able to know such shocking news. This Wuxia is really an old fox. The head of the business pretended to be surprised and asked, since he has so many goods, why does he keep hiding that he doesn't have any? The steward of the treasure house asked with a bitter smile, you're also a businessman. How can you not know that the rarer something is, the greater its value? The fewer things there are, the more people want it, and the higher the price they offer. Only then can the colored glass of the heavenly palace be sold at a good price. If they were all displayed at once, how could they sell so well? Wuxia has used this method too many times, but there are still so many people rushing to give him money. Sigh. The steward of the treasure house sighed. The head of the business stroked his beard and smiled, business is business. Speaking of businessmen, I quite admire Wuxia. A businessman from Dongqing was able to gain a foothold in the north borderline and have been doing business for so many years. It's indeed worth learning from his methods. People in the same trade are enemies. Seeing Wuxia make a lot of money, who wouldn't be envious? The head of the business thought for a while. If he had so many colored glass of the heavenly palace, he would probably sell them as soon as possible. How could he be like Wuxia, patiently operating it and raising its value to the peak? Admittedly, Wuxia didn't sell much, but he did earn a lot of money. However, it was a pity that Wuxia did a good business and was good at managing his subordinates, but his ability to guard against thieves, tsk. Chapter 564. Look, didn't he smash a hole in the treasure house that was like an iron bucket and obtain information about the treasure house's lifeline? The treasure house manager's face was ashen. The head of the Northern Borderline Trading Company patted him on the shoulder and said, don't be discouraged, good days are still ahead. According to our previous discussion, you steal those colored glass of the heavenly palace and sell them to me at a discount of 30%. The money is yours. The treasure house manager was a little hesitant. I betrayed the shopkeeper this time. I'm afraid he can't tolerate me. Only 30%, the head of the trading company said. Wuxia still has nearly 2,000 pieces of colored glass of the heavenly palace. Do you know how huge a figure it is to sell all of them at 30%? Besides our trading company alliance, who can buy it all at once? The money you get will be far more than what Wuxia earns. All of this money will be yours in the future. It's like a pie falling from the sky. If you take it all for yourself, you'll be as rich as a country in the future. The treasure house manager was tempted. A look of hesitation and greed flashed across his face. This made the head of the trading company very satisfied. After a while, the treasure house manager gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, I agree. But I don't think I'll be alive to enjoy so much money." The head of the trading company smiled and said, "I can lend you people to escort you safely out of the northern borderline. But you want to buy slaves and horses, that won't do. Recently, the higher-ups have been very strict with these two businesses. You can only sell to the people of the northern borderline, not even to people of other countries." The treasure house manager said, "Then, can I buy sheepskin?" The head of the trading company heard that Gu Xian often bought sheepskin from various families. He didn't buy a lot each time, but it added up to a huge amount. He pretended to be confused and said, "Sheepskin has a strong smell and can't be made into clothes. What business can I do with it?" The treasure house manager sneered and said, "Gu Xian sold those sheepskin at a high price to the people of Nansheng and the barbarians of the 4 factions of Nanman. With these sheepskin, he made a huge sum of money last winter. This kind of beast who makes money from national disasters is not worth working with." The head of the trading company raised his eyebrows and sneered. Business is business. As long as there is money to be made in business, who cares if it's national disasters? The treasure house manager was convinced by the head of the trading company and nodded with an ashen face. The head of the trading firm said, "Don't worry about the sheepskin, I'll make sure to arrange it for you. As for sheepskin, which family doesn't have hundreds of them? You can easily find tens of thousands of them. Set a time and I'll get them for you. You can have as many as you want." The northern borderline herded horses and sheep, and every household raised many cows, sheep, and horses. The sheep would grow their wool crazily in the winter, so the trimmed wool was useless. They would even complain that it smelled too bad when used to make fire. Now that someone was buying it, even if the price was very low, it was better than nothing. It could be considered as an extra income for the people of the northern borderline. In order to resist foreign businesses, the royal court of the northern borderline established various trading companies according to the advice of the wise man, and each trading company formed an alliance with each other. It was impossible to swallow Gu Xian's colored glass of the heavenly palace in one go with just one trading company, and they didn't have that much money either. Therefore, he had to unite the trading companies and buy this batch of goods together. The land of the northern borderline was not suitable for farming, but it was rich in minerals and produced all kinds of precious stones, gold, silver, jade, and spices. The value of these things was not even half of the value in Dongqing. In comparison, copper and iron were more valued than gold, silver, and jewelry. If they exchanged gold, silver, and jewelry for the colored glass of the heavenly palace, the trading company of the northern borderline would make a huge profit, and the final profit would be more than 9 times. In the face of such a huge temptation, it was better to do it sooner rather than later. Taking advantage of the opportunity when Gu Xian went to other countries to do business and was unable to take care of the northern borderline, the manager of the treasure house stole the colored glass of the heavenly palace in batches and sold it to the trading company of the northern borderline at a low price of 30%, in exchange for a large amount of gold, silver, jewelry, and sheepskin wool. The manager of the treasure house was also a scheming person, and he did things flawlessly. This made the head of the trading company sigh with emotion. As expected of a manager trained by Gu Xian, his style was just like him. It was a pity that when Gu Xian returned and saw the empty treasure house, he would vomit blood in anger. Thinking of that wonderful scene, the head of the trading company couldn't help but smile. In the end, the manager of the treasure house forged Gu Xian's warrant and dismissed the treasure house and its branch business in the northern borderline. He left the northern borderline with the old man of the treasure house, the gold, silver, jewelry, and hundreds of thousands of sheepskin wool, and headed in the direction of Nanxing country. Before leaving, the manager of the treasure house also secretly asked the head of the trading company if he could secretly sell some horses to him. The head of the trading company said, "Didn't I say before that the higher-ups are very strict with this business? Horses can't be sold." The manager of the treasure house said, "You also said that business is business. There is money to be made in this business, so why not do it? The head of the trading company smiled and said nothing. The manager of the treasure house refused to give up and asked about the famous horses in the northern borderline. The head of the trading company was annoyed by the questions. He said, "If you want to buy horses, you can ask the horse merchants in Shaolin country. They have just presented more than 10 Fergana horses to the imperial court. I heard that those horses are very expensive, even better than the best horses in the northern borderline. But it's a pity that along the way, 4 horses died of illness. Although the horses over there are expensive, they are indeed good horses." The manager of the treasure house asked in surprise, "What kind of place is Shaolin country?" The head of the trading company said, "I don't know either, but that place is very far away. I heard that there are only spring and summer in a year, and it is very hot and dry. The people over there are all tanned like charcoal. If it gets dark, you can't even see a person. Their brains are stupid, but their limbs are strong." The manager of the treasure house grunted and seemed to be a little tempted. The head of the trading company didn't mind connecting the two parties. The manager of the treasure house took the opportunity to see the Fergana horses from Shaolin country. They were indeed extraordinary. "But, why, they don't look very energetic," the head of the trading company said with an indifferent expression. "I heard that they traveled for more than half a year. Even people can't stand it, let alone horses. They will be fine after resting for a while. If you want to buy horses, you can talk to the head of the trading company in Shaolin country. If the price is right, he might sell you one." People also had problems with acclimatization, and horses were the same. They would be fine after resting for a while. It had always been like this, so the head of the trading company didn't care. The manager of the treasure house asked about the price and was scared off. The horses were good horses, but a top-grade Fergana horse cost 5 or 600,000 strings of coins. Who could afford it? Every year, the northern borderline would buy horses from Shaolin country, not for people to ride, but to use the Fergana horses of Shaolin country and the good warhorses of the local horse farms to breed high-quality warhorses. If that was the case, the price was actually not expensive. Seeing that the manager of the treasure house was scared off, the head of the trading company laughed secretly. Chapter 565. The manager of the treasure house hesitated. How many times could he see a horse of such high quality in his life? However, when he thought of the value of a Fergana horse as high as 5 to 600,000 strings of coins, he was scared off and shook his head like a rattle drum. This thing was too expensive. He couldn't afford it. "It's not that I don't want to buy it, it's just that the price is really too expensive. It's not worth it, it's really not worth it." Seeing that he was so stingy, the head of the commercial firm despised him and laughed at the same time. Even if some people had money, they were at most just local tycoons. They didn't have great foresight and insight, and they didn't consider the big picture. Was a Fergana horse worth 5 to 600,000 strings of coins expensive? This price was indeed very expensive, but what if these Fergana horses were excellent stallions? Any horse farm that got such a high-quality Fergana horse could breed countless high-quality warhorses, and the value created in a few years would far exceed this price. The warhorses of the northern borderline were so sought after because of their persistent efforts to improve the horse's bloodline. With a large number of high-quality warhorses, the combat power of the northern borderline could improve so quickly. Therefore, in the eyes of the head of the commercial firm, the manager of the treasure house was really short-sighted and useless. With this judgment, the head of the commercial firm was more at ease with the manager of the treasure house. He was happy and blurted out, "I think you really like good horses. I have a few mixed-blood Fergana horses. Although they aren't as pure-blooded as Shaolin, they've been carefully cultivated for 2 generations. They're of extremely good quality. Do you want to take a look? But I'll say this in advance. If you want to buy them, you can only buy one. Those good horses are all registered. If there are too few, it'll be hard to explain." The manager of the treasure house's heart trembled. Was he going to smuggle a fine horse to him? Of course, he had to agree to such a good thing. The northern borderline was vast and rich in high-quality horses. The imperial court kept a close eye on each horse farm. However, there would always be people who would take risks for the sake of profit. The horse that Lu Shi gave to Jiang Pengji was smuggled out. It was originally meant to be presented to the king of the northern borderline, but the officials under him intercepted it and sold it. The horse that they gave to the king was slightly inferior. Now that the situation was tense, good horses could not be bought and sold carelessly. Horses that could be bought and sold privately naturally had some tricks up their sleeves. For example, the owner of the horse farm would privately embezzle the money and report that the newborn foals had died from dystocia or had died prematurely. Then, he would raise them in private and sell them at a high price. The manager of the treasure house looked at the few fine horses that the head of the trading company was talking about. They were not very old, but one could already see their future glory. He swallowed nervously and obsessively. Compared to the Fergana horses, which had a thin head, a high neck, thin skin, fine hair, and appeared lean, the manager of the treasure house preferred the hybrid of the Fergana horses and the local horses of the northern borderline. It not only had the advantages of the Fergana horses, such as great strength, speed, and endurance, but it also had the advantages of the local horses, such as strong explosive power, strong weight-bearing, light footsteps, and strong physique. Which man wouldn't like it? The Fergana horses of Shalan were good in every way except for one thing, which was that they were slightly lean. However, after 2 generations of hybridization, the horses in front of him that had improved their bloodlines could be said to be real godly horses. The head of the trading company was very satisfied with the obsessive reaction of the manager of the treasure house. He said in a slightly proud tone, "Are you satisfied with what you see?" The manager of the treasure house nodded like pounding garlic and said obsequiously, "I'm satisfied, I can't be more satisfied. I've never seen such a handsome horse in my life. I really have to thank you this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have the luck to see such a magnificent horse." The head of the trading company was very satisfied. He said, "If you like it, you can pick any one. We're old friends, so I'll give you the best price." The manager of the treasure house didn't know much about horses, but he knew that if the dozen or so horses in front of him were not good, the head of the trading company wouldn't have valued them so much. Therefore, he didn't have to worry about the quality of the fine horses. He only needed to pick the best-looking one. Yes, he was a beauty lover. The color of these fine horses was very pure. Among a group of brown, brownish-red, brownish-yellow, and pure black horses, the manager of the treasure house saw the snow-white horse at first glance. There was not a trace of other colors on its body, and it had a light body and vigorous gait. It was a beauty among horses. What a beautiful little girl. I'll choose this one. The manager of the treasure house raised his hand and touched the mane of the horse. The horse snorted but didn't reject it. Its temperament was very docile. The head of the trading company was strangely silent for a moment. "This is a male." The manager of the treasure house, "A male?" He was surprised and asked, "Has this horse been gelded?" The head of the trading company said, "This horse hasn't been gelded yet." What was gelding? To put it bluntly, it was castration. Male warhorses were all castrated. They were the so-called geldings. These male horses were more docile and easy to tame. They also wouldn't go into estrus. After all, anything could happen on the battlefield. If a male horse went into estrus, who would be able to tame it? The horses used for riding were all gelded. Each horse farm would keep the best quality male horses as stud horses to breed excellent offspring. The expression of the manager of the treasure house became even more strange. He couldn't help but look at the horse. A gelding that hadn't been gelded could have such a good temper. The other party seemed to grin and laugh at his lack of knowledge. The head of the trading company said without hesitation, "This horse hasn't been gelded. Its temperament is volatile and it's not easy to tame. Do you want to change to another one?" The manager of the treasure house shook his head and said, "I like the color white. It's the only one here that's white, and it's so beautiful. I'll choose it." "Oh, as long as you like it," the manager of the treasure house left with the big white horse. The money was directly deducted from the smuggled, colored glass of the heavenly palace. At the end of September, the sky rained. The dry land in the north finally had rained to moisten it. On the day it rained, Dian Yen, the rough man, rushed to the government office with a face full of ecstasy to report the good news. My lord, it's raining. It's finally raining. Jiang Pengji raised her eyelids and put down the brush and ink in her hand. She got up and picked up the cloak beside her to put it on. It's raining. Why are you so surprised? Even so, Jiang Pengji's words still carried a faint smile. In this era, the heavens depended on what people ate. In the past, artificial rain could still be made, but now it couldn't. The autumn harvest was getting closer and closer, but the weather showed no signs of improving. The dug canals were gradually drying up. The people's hearts were wavering. Jiang Pengji was worried about how to appease the people, but she didn't expect the heavens to give her face. It started to rain without warning. At first, it was drizzling. Then it became raindrops the size of beans, falling with a pitter-patter. The people of Fengyi County were ecstatic. Every household took out their pots and pans to collect the water. The farmers who were worried about their fields were overjoyed. They shouted and rushed into the rain, laughing loudly. Chapter 566. The precious rain lasted for 2 days and 2 nights. It was not until the morning of the 3rd day that the rain gradually subsided. When the golden morning light pierced through the misty morning mist, the air was suffused with the fragrance of water vapor and soil. Seeing this, Jiang Pengji gradually felt relieved. Just in case, she brought Zhang Ping and the craftsmen of the carpentry workshop to inspect the canals and reservoirs. Only after making sure that the water was flowing smoothly did she feel slightly relieved. If there was a flood after the drought, it would be impossible to live on. The dried-up mountain stream had the sound of flowing water again. The leaves that had withered for a whole summer stretched their limbs and gradually regained their vitality. The rain has stopped. The pond in the courtyard was filled with clean and clear water again. Under Takshu's instructions, the maidservant released a few goldfish that were kept in the water tank and added some water plants. The maidservant, who had a slender waist and a delicate appearance, also had a joyful expression on her face. She looked innocent. After the rain, the weather gradually cooled down. The air also faded away from the previous stuffiness and heat. Taking a deep breath, the spleen and lungs also became a little more moist. Jiang Pengji changed into the new autumn clothes made by the maidservant. The material was slightly thicker than the fabric worn in the summer. Due to the influence of the integration of force, the genes of this body had been improved. At the age of 17, she was already taller than some adult men. If converted to the unit of length that the audience in the streaming room was used to, she was about 1.75 meters. Looking at this growth, it was estimated that she could grow a few more centimeters. In terms of the average height of men and women in this era, her height was quite rare. Lang Jun, you're awake. Takshu was the first to notice her gaze. She smiled and bowed to greet her. The other maidservants bowed one after another. A beautiful young girl and a gentleman in the streaming room were cheering. Jiang Pengji's mood also became a lot better. Yes. She nodded and said, I'm going to the government office. Rainwater hung on the branches and dripped down. Feng Jin, who had been worried about the drought, was also refreshed at this moment. Good morning, my lord. Feng Jin greeted her. After getting a reply, he continued with the matter at hand. Jiang Pengji flipped through the bamboo slips on her table and asked, Shiheng still hasn't come to the government office today? Feng Jin asked, My lord, why are you looking for him? Zhang Ping was not good at government affairs, and he was also obsessed with all kinds of woodworking. He might not even come to the government office to take a roll call every 10 days or half a month. If he went to the carpentry workshop to arrest people, Zhang Ping would definitely be there. Jiang Pengji said, the rain was frighteningly heavy 2 days ago. I'm afraid there will be a flood. I plan to bring Shiheng along to take a look. Many floods did not accumulate water because of heavy rain. Instead, it was because the drainage system under the city was not good enough and could not divert the water in time, resulting in excessive water accumulating in one place. When Jiang Pengji rebuilt Xiangyang district, she also considered the construction of the sewers. However, Xiangyang district was not big and the construction of the sewers was not complicated. When Xiangyang district was completed, the sewers were also completed. The rain 2 days ago was frighteningly heavy. She thought that Xiangyang district would be flooded. Fortunately, both the old and new sewer drainage systems were powerful. In addition to the few canals built before summer, the water flow was stabilized. Even the farmlands were not affected. He could not help but recall the scene 2 days ago when Jiang Pengji wore a straw raincoat and brought people to patrol. His heart warmed slightly. My lord sympathizes with the people. You are very kind. The two of them had not spoken much when the otaku handicraft expert, Zhang Ping, came over. He was dressed in brown and wore a bamboo hat on his head. He looked very down to earth. Where did he have the demeanor of a famous scholar? Jiang Pengji put down what she was doing and went out with Zhang Ping. The sewers of this era were very different from the sewers that the viewers in the streaming room knew. The modern sewers were more like underground passageways that discharged the city's domestic sewage and rainstorms and floods. However, for the manpower of this era, the amount of work required was huge and there were many drawbacks. Whoever built such a sewers would be a fool. Why did she say so? Firstly, the price-performance ratio was too low. The materials from ancient times could not satisfy such a difficult construction structure. Even if it could be built, the final cost of labor and materials would be too high. It was not realistic at all. Therefore, Jiang Pengji did not consider this at all. Secondly, the form of war in this era also determined that the sewers were not realistic. If the enemy sneaked into the city through the sewers and caught the defending general unprepared, who would be to blame then? This was no longer a trap. It was a trap for the people of the entire city. In fact, the so-called sewers were just ditches that covered the entire city. The drainage capacity was rather poor. During the rainy season, water would often accumulate. If it was even worse, it would be a torrential flood that would drown the entire city. After Jiang Pengji set up the brick kiln, she specially ordered the craftsmen to bake hollow pipes with a thick diameter. Every hollow pipe in the shape of a long tube could be inlaid with each other. The inspiration came from the mortise and tenon of house beams. Then, she ordered people to dig ditches in the main streets of Xiangyang district. Finally, the fired hollow pipes were buried in them. They were connected in series and connected to the drainage outlet. Such drainage pipes could be found all over Xiangyang district. If there was such a heavy rain in the past, Xiangyang district would have been knee-deep in the water. It was very different today. The roads were still fine. The two of them found a tea house and sat down. Jiang Pengji thought of the urgent letter she received yesterday. She couldn't help but laugh. I've already asked the other 3 districts to gather local materials and bake these hollow pipes. When it's really completed, the people of the 3 districts won't have to worry about their houses being flooded when they sleep. Apart from Xiangyang district, Jiaoping district, Maolin district and Qingan district were all drenched by the heavy rain. The water was knee-deep. Fortunately, the rain didn't last for too long. It would subside in another half a day. Zhang Ping said, "My lord, you've thought it through. It's better not to delay this matter. This summer, it hasn't rained at all. Now there's only a rainstorm. This is already very good. If it was in previous years, when the rain was abundant, I'm afraid Fengyi County would be flooded and the fields would suffer." Ever since he started working for Jiang Pengji, Zhang Ping never had a day to rest. However, he enjoyed it. He never thought that the Mahist craftsman's tricks could play such a big role. If they could specialize in this area and let the Mahist techniques permeate every aspect of the people's lives, their final status would not be any lower than that of the Confucians. In order to get through the rainy season next year, the drainage system must be done well. The drainage pipes weren't for war, but they were related to the people's quality of life. Naturally, Jiang Pengji attached great importance to them. The two of them talked in low voices. The people in the tea house also subconsciously kept their voices down. They didn't dare to disturb them. Because Jianghu often appeared on the streets and alleys, she didn't put on the airs of a district magistrate. When she was bored, she would even help the older farmers with their farm work. There wasn't anyone in Xiangyang district who didn't know her. It was normal for her to bring her subordinates to go shopping and discuss political affairs. Chapter 567. The government office is flooded. The rain is too heavy. Yang Si tied a knot at the hem of his shirt, revealing his two bare calves soaking in the water. He moved the bamboo slips and documents to the cabinet for a long time. He was so tired that he was panting and could not straighten his back. Wei Si sat on the two stacked tables and looked at him with a smile. Jingrong, you eat and drink all day without doing any work. Are you suffering now? Look at how many bamboo slips you've moved, but you're so tired that you can't straighten your back. This won't do. Yang Si was so tired that his forehead was sweating. Unfortunately, Wei Si was still making sarcastic remarks. He could not help but glare at him fiercely. Don't be so arrogant, you fox. When this matter is over, I'll go far away and never see you again, you black-hearted fox. Yang Si and the boy servant panted as they moved the bamboo slips. Wei Si sat on the table to avoid the water. What was this? Unfortunately, Wei Si was weak. If he was asked to do the hard work, he might fall into the water. Wei Si lifted his sleeves to cover his lips and smiled. You can say this if you can walk away. He had boarded Her Majesty's pirate ship and still wanted to leave. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Yang Si's anger rose. He regretted coming to Qingan district for the umpteenth time. If he had known earlier, he would have stayed under Prince Changshuo's tent. It was not worth it to sell himself to Jianghu, Zhoubapi, just for a few meals. You fox, if you don't restrain your nature, others will be so scared that they won't dare to come over. Yang Si knew that Wei Si had sent letters to many of his good friends with the intention of recruiting them. But this was a trap. Once he jumped in, he could not get out. Wei Si blinked and said innocently, Jingrong, you don't have to worry about this. Looking at the time, the fat fish may have taken the bait. Yang Si was strangely silent for a while and asked, You mean the fat fish? So the friends that Wei Si made were fat fish that could be tricked in his eyes? Wei Zixiao, doesn't your conscience hurt? What made his heart hurt was that he seemed to be one of the fat fish in Wei Si's eyes. If he had not walked right into the trap, he might have received a recruitment letter from Wei Si. Thinking of that scene, Yang Si felt that he was about to have a mental breakdown. He wished that he could throw Wei Si into the water. You damned fox, see if I don't crush you to death today. I'm enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. Yang Si rolled up his sleeves and looked like he was going to fight Wei Si to the death. Watching the two teachers bickering and fooling around, the errand boy felt extremely tired. When it came to hard work, his master had only helped a little. The heaviest work still fell on him. The drainage pipes in Qingan district had not been paved yet. The previous drainage ditches were broken and old. After 2 days of heavy rain, the entire city had turned into a vast ocean. Fortunately, the water was not deep. Yang Si led the people to drain the water urgently. By noon, the water in the city had basically been emptied. The situation in the other two counties was worse than Qingan district, but compared to before, the situation had improved a lot. This heavy rain alleviated the drought in the north. The dry and cracked farmland was soaked in a layer of water. The dry and hard soil also turned into soft silt. Yang Si and the others began to get busy. On one hand, they had to keep an eye on the construction of the houses in the city. On the other hand, they had to keep an eye on the burning of the hollow pipes. After the burning was done, they had to lead people to dig the ditches, drain the water in the ground, dry it, and then bury the hollow pipes. Because Qingan district was this year's experimental county for farming, the number of wastelands reclaimed was huge. The people still needed to work day and night. In addition to these trivial matters, they had to handle the resettlement of the refugees, the distribution of wastelands, the registration of personnel, the provision of porridge, all the trivial matters had to be handled. I really hate that I didn't give me more hands when I was born. These days, Yang Si was so busy that his eye sockets were sunken, his eye bags were dark, and his eyes were bloodshot. Even if the government office specially assigned a private chef for him, he could not be happy, because he was so damn tired that he did not even have time to eat. Wasn't this a trap? Yang Si said shakily, I'm going to write a letter and tell them, this is a trap, don't walk right into it. The originally calm and composed strategist was now as aggrieved as a child. Wei Ci smiled and said, that's not right. The more people there are, the less work to be shared. If no one came, wouldn't he be the one who would be tired? Yang Si looked like he had nothing to live for. The thing I regret the most in this life is getting to know you. If there's a next life, remember to stay far away. Wei Ci smiled faintly and said mischievously, it's useless for me to stay far away. The main point is to avoid the Lord. Thinking about his previous life, in order not to be a burden to Yang Si, the two of them had little contact in private. Did that mean that Yang Si did less work? He was still so tired that he wanted to go on strike every day. Her Majesty was too ambitious and had too many things to do. She looked like she could not wait to finish the things that would take thousands of years in a few decades. Her Majesty was busy day and night. Which of the officials under her did not keep up with her bitterly? If they wanted to be free in their next life, they had to first open their eyes wide to see clearly where Her Majesty was and avoid her. Only then could they be free. Yang Si was so choked that he could not breathe. After a while, he muttered, who do you think that fat fish is? Do I know him? Everyone's circle of friends was different. Wei Ci's friends might not be Yang Si's friends. Wei Ci said, you may have heard of this person. His name is Fengzhen. His courtesy name is Zishur. He is from Jiangzhou's Anshan County. Jiangzhou's Anshan County? Wasn't that Prince Changshou's fief? According to Prince Changshou's previous role as a virtuous king, there was no reason for him to let a talent slip away from his hands. Jiangzhou's Anshan County. That place is very far from here. It takes at least half a year for your letters to come and go. How did you get a reply so quickly? Yang Si frowned. I have heard of this Feng Zishur. His character is not very good. The key was that this Fengzhen also seemed to be a sickly person. Unlike Wei Ci's weak body that was acquired, Fengzhen's weak body was brought out from his mother's womb. Two sickly people gathered together. Were they trying to kill him, Yang Si? Wei Ci said, Zishur is a carefree person. He always likes to say, happiness should be enjoyed in time, how can it be delayed? His body is not good and he was born weak. It's not bad to have such a carefree personality. It's much better than being depressed in his heart and being young. Yang Si raised his eyebrows. It seemed like Wei Ci was also a person who liked to be stubborn and depressed all day long. Did he have the cheek to say this? Hearing you say this, I'm a little interested. Wei Ci was silent for a while and looked at Yang Si with pity. This kind of interest was not good. If not for Fengzhen's ability, Wei Ci would not have been able to write letters to his friends in Zhongzhou. He really did not want to recruit Fengzhen. One Her Majesty was hard enough to serve. Now that there was Fengzhen, his days would really be chaotic. To put it nicely, Fengzhen's temperament was carefree. To put it bluntly, he was unrestrained. The Fengzhen that Wei Ci knew in his past life could be described with one word, unrestrained. Because doctors always said that Fengzhen's body was weak and that he would not live long, Fengzhen felt that life was short and that he had to enjoy himself. So this person courted death in all kinds of ways. He ate hanshi powder like it was rice. He slept with women every night and drank until he was unconscious. He was proficient in eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling. He thought about how to court death all day long and how to court death. He greatly damaged the atmosphere of the group under Her Majesty. What was the result? In his past life, Wei Ci had knelt down and Fengzhen was still alive and kicking. Chapter 568. My lord, Ping feels a little strange. Jiang Pengji smiled as she took a pair of chopsticks and asked him, what's strange? She brought Zhang Ping to inspect all the drainage points in Xiangyang district and found that the drainage pipes were operating normally. Coincidentally, the scorching sun was high above their heads and their stomachs were empty. Jiang Pengji and Zhang Ping found a table in a restaurant and planned to order a few dishes to make up for a meal. Coincidentally, the restaurant was opened by the government and was named Greeting Guests House. She looked around. The restaurant's decoration was simple and elegant. The environment was quiet and secluded. It was indeed a good place to eat. Yes, Wei Ci did a good job in this area. Not long after they sat down, the curtain of the small room was lifted and a waiter with a broken palm came in. The waiter looked at Jiang Pengji and Zhang Ping in astonishment. He was stunned for a while before he knelt down heavily. Your humble servant greets you, my lord. The restaurant was opened by the government. The employees were either injured retired soldiers or the families of soldiers who died in battle. The waiter in front of them was a soldier who retired due to disability. He found a position as a waiter in the restaurant. Although he was a waiter, he was a veteran who had been to the battlefield. He could also be a hired thug. His monthly salary was enough to support a family of 3. Until now, the veteran still insisted on the habit of daily morning training. Although he was disabled, he was in good spirits. Jiang Pengji said, get up. Shiheng and I are just here for a meal. Don't be so formal. The waiter got up obediently, but he was still somewhat restrained. Jiang Pengji took a roll of bamboo slips. It was the menu of the restaurant. The ideas provided by the viewers in the streaming room were written on each bamboo slip. They were categorized and looked very novel. Jiang Pengji looked at the names of the dishes and ordered 3 vegetarian dishes and 2 meat dishes. She then passed the menu to Zhang Ping. She took the opportunity to ask some questions. Basically, she asked about the veteran's life after he was disabled and retired. The veteran slowly let go of his courage and was not so restrained. She asked a question and the veteran answered it honestly. Your humble servant's life is not bad, my lord. A few months ago, Iceman made a matchmaker and married a wife. She is now 3 months pregnant. The work in the restaurant is not heavy. I come to clean at dawn every day and prepare to open the restaurant. I close at dusk. I get 2 salaries every month. My family eats, wears, and has a lot of money left every month. My wife is also hardworking. She knits a sweater at home. Jiang Pengji asked in detail, and the veteran had a lot to say. His face was flushed with excitement, and there was no hint of gloom. Zhang Ping silently looked through the menu 17 to 18 times, buying time for his lord. Hard Cuban, work starts at 5:00 in the morning and closes at 9:00 in the evening. Forget it, that means work starts at 5:00 in the morning and closes at 9:00 at night? Would it be too tiring? Now that he had lost his left hand, would it be inconvenient for him to live? If this was the modern era, he might still be able to reattach his hand, but in ancient times, he would be crippled for life. Strive for next month, listen carefully to their conversation. This veteran can receive 3 years of disability compensation. That's quite a lot. He's working as a waiter and a bodyguard, earning 2 people's wages. His life should be pretty good, right? After watching the live stream for a long time, the audience more or less understood Jiang Pengji's situation. The veteran's life was not bad. Midnight Shuxian, by the way, why do they have to give the disability allowance for 3 years? Can't they just give it all at once? Wuxia Chronicles, according to my analysis, there are probably 2 reasons. If they give it all at once, the burden on the streamer will be huge. After all, it's not a single soldier's death or injury. Secondly, if they don't restrain themselves and spend it all, what will they do in the future? I think the 3-year allowance is to give the veteran some buffer time. In 3 years, if they are patient, they can learn a trade to make a living. When the time comes, they can still support themselves without the allowance. Although the audience in the live stream did not all guess correctly, it was not far from Jiang Pengji's intention. The veteran was hardworking, and the wife he married was also capable. There was still hope for the family's life. Jiang Pengji nodded, and Zhang Ping tactfully handed the menu back to the veteran. After the veteran left, Zhang Ping said, "Business at the guest house is not bad. The food in the restaurant was delicious, and it was always full of guests at mealtimes. Even though the price was 4 to 5 times more expensive than ordinary restaurants, there were still people who came to support them. Of course, the people did not have the money to eat there often, but they could afford to eat there occasionally." Jiang Pengji said, "When the business of the restaurant stabilizes, I plan to let the chef teach the recipes of ordinary dishes to other restaurants in the county." Zhang Ping was stunned and did not react for a moment. Why did the Lord suddenly say this? Jiang Pengji said, "The officials don't compete with the people, and the people can't afford to compete. The business of the guest house is good enough. If it continues to grow, it will definitely suppress the restaurants of other people, which goes against my original intention. Let the chef publicize the recipes of ordinary dishes, and the people can also eat cheap and delicious food. The guest house will continue to take the more expensive route, and the two will not interfere with each other." Jiang Pengji thought for a long time about the name of the restaurant. In the end, she accepted the audience's suggestion and named it Guest House. To put it bluntly, it was a problem of the customer base. The restaurant of the common people served the common people, and a meal did not cost much. The dishes made by the guest house were more expensive, and they served customers with financial ability. They took the middle and high-end route, and tried to separate the customer base of the two. Jiang Pengji was not short of money. She could afford to subsidize the disabled soldiers, but there was no need to steal the business of the common people. Zhang Ping understood and could not help but feel emotional. When she was unreliable, his lord was really unreliable. But when the lord was reliable, a wise ruler was nothing more than that. How many high-ranking people took the people's money in an unsightly manner? Only his lord could see it clearly, and she did it flawlessly. While the two were talking, a frightening cough came from the restaurant next door. Zhang Ping suddenly thought of something and said, "My lord." Zhang Ping remembered what was wrong. There were coughs along the way. He did not know when it started, but Zhang Ping could always hear the coughs. Who was he muttering about before? Why did he come out to wander around when he was so sick? Now. His expression turned serious, and he raised his hand to pull out the short dagger from his waist. He looked dangerously in the direction of the coughs. They were being followed all the way. Jiang Pengji smiled and waved her hand at him. "Put it away, it's just a meal." Zhang Ping was an introverted scholar with mediocre martial arts skills, but Jiang Pengji was not. She knew long ago that someone was following them. Zhang Ping was surprised, and he sheathed the dagger before the waiter served the dishes. "My lord, you knew long ago?" Zhang Ping asked. "What else?" Jiang Pengji smiled and turned her body to make it convenient for the waiter to set up the table. "Who doesn't know this face in Xiangyang district? I'm not popular either. What if someone finds me an eyesore and tries to harm me when I'm alone? If your lord did not have this little bit of vigilance, how would she dare to bring a weakling around the district? Let's eat, we'll meet the person next door after we're full." As soon as she finished speaking, the coughs became more intense. Chapter 569. Yan Rian, ha 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 ha, I feel like Zhang Ping is hurt. The streamer's words are a critical hit. Sophie Tang Tang, cough, cough, cough. Although I also want to laugh, I don't think Zhang Ping understands what Zhang Ping means, does he? Vegetarian number, I hope he doesn't understand. He'll be sad if he does. Speaking of which, who isn't Zhang Ping in front of the streamer? Xiao Santian, ha ha ha, slapped the table. My friend above, your words are too hurtful. Zhang Ping smiled sheepishly. His martial arts skills were indeed lacking. He had no problem dealing with ordinary people, but if he encountered a ruthless character who was difficult to deal with, a salted fish like him could only lie on the ground and cheer for his lord. He could only sit and watch as his lord fought them all. My lord, why is he following us? Zhang Ping did not discover the whereabouts of that person. Apart from being too focused on his work, another reason was that he could not sense the person's malice. Jiang Pengji said, I don't know either, but he is indeed an interesting person. Zhang Ping was surprised. Seeing that his lord had some interest on her face, he was a little more curious about the guest he had never met before. The other party coughed for a long time and finally calmed down. However, Jiang Pengji knew that the person was still next door and was leisurely enjoying his lunch. Her appetite was much larger than that of a normal man. She ate several times more food every meal. Zhang Ping was very surprised every time. His lord didn't look sturdy, so where exactly did she put all the food? After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the conversation between the waiter and the strange man could be heard from outside the dining room. Jiang Pengji said, let him in. After a while, the curtain of the dining room was lifted and a man wearing old gray clothes walked in. The man was about 27 or 28 years old. His figure was thin, and the loose, old-fashioned clothes he wore made him look even thinner. There was not much flesh on his cheeks. His chin was slightly sharp. His thin lips were abnormally light green and his face was paler than normal people. If it was not for his clear features and temperament, he might have been mistaken for an old hooligan who was addicted to wine and women. When the person appeared, the audience in the streaming room became lively. Hard Cuban, this person's image is really good. He gives off the feeling of a sick and weak wastrel. A decadent beauty. Dongfang Yaoya, host, are you trying to summon a dragon with all kinds of handsome men? The elegant man, his wife Wei Zixiao, the gentle and dignified Feng Huayu, the adorable Li Hanmei, the foodie Yang Jingrong, the virtuous and naggy Su Xiaoyu, the mature and gloomy Qiguan Wenzheng. Wu. Now, there was an unknown, sickly, dissolute, and good-looking young man. This live stream room was so good-looking. Tang Xiao Yao is also me, there's nothing wrong with these descriptions. But what the hell is Yang Jingrong, a foodie and stupid person? Be careful of Yang Si looking for you to have a heart-to-heart talk in the middle of the night. Yang Si's description to Beauty Wei Ci was clearly, overthinking, sinister, and good at using poisonous tricks. Shuxian Taishuang, if Prince Charming Yang Si really wants to settle accounts in the middle of the night, remember to inform him to come to my bed. The bed is already warmed. Jiang Pengji glanced at the newcomer. He didn't stand on ceremony at all. He shamelessly found a seat near Jiang Pengji and sat down. She suddenly said, if you don't want to die young, with no one to take care of the orphans, it's better to stop using hanshi powder. That person looked at Jiang Pengji. Zhang Ping also looked at the unfamiliar man in astonishment. You've been consuming hanshi powder for at least 4 years. If this continues, you'll have to report to the King of Hell. Recently, you've been consuming hanshi powder. The interval between each use is getting shorter and shorter. If you don't make up your mind to quit, you can even consider which tomb to be buried in after you die. Have you experienced the feeling of your addiction acting up? If it acts up and you can't buy hanshi powder, do you think you have the willpower not to beg others? She asked with a natural expression. I can see that you're quite an arrogant person. You probably don't want others to see you at your most pathetic state. The young man originally had a disdainful smile on his face. The more he listened, the worse his expression became. His dark eyes carried a stern look. Zhang Ping was dumbfounded as he listened. Jiang Pengji said to herself, forget it, I think you're not suitable. The young man was astonished. He didn't say anything. The indignation and anger in his heart rose again. What do you mean by this? Jiang Pengji said bluntly, although you didn't say anything, when you came in, I already knew everything. You observed me and Shiheng along the way, did you really think I didn't notice? I think you're probably a talent that Zixiao wrote a letter to recruit. You're observing me to see if I'm suitable. However, a wise man can choose his master. Conversely, a master can also choose a wise man. When you came in, I already felt you're not suitable. Zhang Ping was astonished. He really wanted to step forward and cover his lord's mouth. If the young man was really recommended by Wei Ci, he must be a great talent. His lord couldn't court disaster like this. The young man saw Zhang Ping's conflicted expression. His mood became slightly better, but he continued to speak harshly. Such a foolish person is the wise lord that Wei Zixiao thinks highly of? He was ridiculed without understanding him. It made him extremely unhappy. The world is full of talents. There's no shortage of troublemakers. With this body of yours, how many years can you serve me? Jiang Pengji returned with the same harsh sarcasm. Think about it carefully. Between the 2 times you consumed the powder, how long can your mind be clear? A clear mind is an essential requirement for a strategist. The young man was addicted to the powder. Jiang Pengji really didn't dare to use it casually. Talents are talents, but not all talents can be used. The young man was silent for a moment. He carefully recalled Jiang Pengji's previous words. Only then did he realize that she wasn't speaking without thinking. Zixiao told you? He had been consuming hanshi powder for some years, but his social circle was very small. It was impossible for Lu Shi to know unless Wei Ci was a busybody. Jiang Pengji replied honestly, no, Zixiao didn't say anything. He didn't even tell me who he wrote the letter to. The young man was interested and deliberately made things difficult for her. I think I have the ability to rule over the world. You chased me away just like that. Aren't you afraid that I'll bear a grudge? Although Fengyi County is one of the few fertile lands in the north, the terrain isn't good. It's easy to attack and hard to defend. If I'm determined to take revenge, it's not like I don't have the ability. Jiang Pengji didn't even lift her eyelids. She mocked back, continue to consume the powder. If your body can live to that age, consider it my loss. The corner of the young man's mouth twitched. He almost couldn't hold it in. There's actually someone who has a worse mouth than me in this world? Zhang Ping was afraid that the young man would leave in a huff. However, the young man didn't leave angrily. He even mocked his lord. Every word was harsh. There was a sense of déjà vu that they were evenly matched. The talents of this generation, he really couldn't understand them. The audience in the streaming room couldn't understand them either. The previous Yang Si and the current Feng Zhen, were they all masochists? If they were strategists, they would have slammed the table and left long ago when they met the streamer who had a bad mouth and a bad temper. The young man's surname was Feng and his given name was Zhen. He was from Jiangzhou's Anshan County. Chapter 570. Jiang Pengji said, think back to the feeling of hanshi powder acting up. Can you touch your conscience and tell me there's no harm? Feng Zhen's face froze. Just like what Jiang Pengji said before, it's been almost 4.5 years since the first time he consumed hanshi powder. In the beginning, he only consumed it once every 1 or 2 months, occasionally to liven up his mood. In recent years, he consumed it once every half a month, until now, once every 7 to 8 days. Every time he consumed it, his mind would become more cheerful, his physical strength would become stronger, his entire body would feel light and his mind would feel extremely comfortable. Once the addiction of the powder hits him, if he didn't consume hanshi powder in time, his bones would feel like they were being bitten by thousands of insects and ants. It would be unbearable. However, he still had some integrity, his dependence on hanshi powder wasn't very serious. If it was someone else who consumed hanshi powder intermittently for 4.5 years, he would probably have lost his mind, indulging in sensual pleasures, headaches and suffocation, restlessness and madness every day. However, based on his current situation, if he continued to consume hanshi powder, the intervals between consumption would get shorter and shorter, his life would be in danger. Jiang Pengji shook her head and said, you've also noticed, from the time you started consuming hanshi powder till now, the intervals between consumption are getting shorter and shorter. If you don't consume it on time, your bones will feel like they are being bitten by thousands of insects and ants, that excruciating pain. Can you endure it? This was a vicious cycle. If he didn't quit hanshi powder, his dependence on hanshi powder would get stronger and stronger, the intervals between consumption would get shorter, the amount of time his mind could stay awake would decrease. After the cycle of nausea, it would be a dead end. Feng Zhen couldn't refute. However, to quit Hanshi powder, he had to endure the process of the addiction acting up. It was easier said than done. Feng Zhen had the same thinking as many gentry. His family was rich and didn't lack Hanshi powder. If the addiction acted up, he could just consume it. Why torture himself? He thought of the pain when the addiction acted up. He shook his head like a rattledrum. No way, no way. The addiction would make one want to die. Why bother to quit? Happiness should come in time. Why wait for it? Life is only 30 to 50 years. Life is short. It's enough to enjoy. Why torture yourself? When the audience in the streaming room heard their conversation, they then clearly realized that the weak and dissolute guy in front of them was an addict. Tian Shu Shiji, this guy is amazing. He's still alive after consuming Hanshi powder for more than 4 years. He's really lucky. Jiao, AI, isn't it good to be alive? Why don't you want to live? Mother's Day the day after tomorrow. I'm scratching the wall. Why do I feel that what this young man said makes sense? Oh no, my 3 views have been turned upside down. Although Hanshi powder wasn't a drug, but if one took too much of it, they would become addicted and their entire life would be ruined. Don't forget to the previous commenter who is making a fuss over nothing, I'm sure you haven't been following the streamer's live stream for a long time. The Hanshi powder has appeared a long time ago. It seems to be somewhat similar to the Wei and Jin dynasties in China. The aristocratic families were very fond of this thing. Did they really not know that Hanshi powder was harmful? Not necessarily. Just like what Feng Zhen had thought, many people knew that once one got addicted to Hanshi powder, it would be extremely painful to quit. But it wasn't as if they couldn't afford to buy Hanshi powder. When they felt uncomfortable, they could just take the powder. Why torment themselves and endure the pain of quitting the powder? In this day and age, beauty is one of the important conditions to become an official, to walk towards the pinnacle of life and to marry a fair, rich and beautiful woman. After consuming the Hanshi powder, one's senses will feel comfortable and it can also make one feel refreshed, with a rosy complexion, fair skin and beautiful appearance. To them, this is a good thing. Hence, there were many admirers. Feng Zhen naturally didn't consume Hanshi powder for his beauty, he purely wanted to enjoy and have fun. Since he didn't have a long life, he wouldn't waste it if he tried everything at least once. Now that Jiang Pengji advised him to quit using Hanshi powder, Feng Zhen expressed that it was impossible, he wouldn't quit even if he died. Jiang Pengji also expressed that she wouldn't accept people who were not clear-headed. Zhang Ping sighed as he watched from the side. His lord was courting death, yet she didn't make him leave in anger. It could be seen that Feng Zhen was also a masochist. Feng Zhen also felt strange. It was fine as long as he was useful, why did she have to interfere in his private affairs? Although the wise lord that Wei Si had acknowledged had the appearance of a wise ruler, his character was not pleasing to the eye. Feng Zhen asked her sarcastically, there are many people who are after Hanshi powder. Are you going to persuade everyone you meet to quit using Hanshi powder? Be careful that no one will be available in the future. At such a young age, he's a busybody. Jiang Pengji was astonished. How can that be? Not everyone has the qualifications for me to persuade them. If he's addicted to Hanshi powder, if he doesn't make up his mind to quit, I'll never use such a useless person. Who knows when his addiction will kick in and he'll delay my work. The world is so big, there will always be people who are clean and clear-headed. Why should I waste my energy on such a useless person? Feng Zhen didn't know if he should feel honored or angry. Such a lord would be done for. If she didn't finish, he would read the 2 words, Feng Zhen, upside down. You've eaten the dishes from the guest house. How do you like the taste? Jiang Pengji asked him. Feng Zhen said, the delicacies of the world. I didn't know that there were so many different types of dishes. Jiang Pengji said coldly, when you die, you won't be able to eat the delicacies anymore. They'll all be on other people's tables. Feng Zhen was speechless. She asked, you like to sleep with women and get drunk until the sun rises? Fengzhen smiled and said, the way of saints is to eat and lust. So what if I like it? He knew that he didn't have long to live. After his wife died, he didn't remarry or take a concubine. He slept with women and lived a carefree life. When you die, the beauty will be in someone else's arms and the wine will be in someone else's cup. Fengzhen was speechless. Jiang Pengji asked again, you're also good at gambling? Fengzhen held it in and said, why can't I gamble a little? Jiang Pengji sighed and said, when you die, the family business that hasn't been squandered yet will belong to someone else. Fengzhen was speechless. You have a son who's not more than 5 years old. Do you have mean relatives in your family? Fengzhen was astonished. He didn't know how she knew all this. He replied, so what if I do? When you die, your relatives will use your inheritance to bully your son. Don't you think that's pitiful? Fengzhen couldn't bear it anymore. His mind was filled with, when you die, when he really died, no, he was still alive, okay? Jiang Pengji said, I agree with what you said, happiness should be enjoyed in time. But people can only enjoy the secular world when they're alive. When they die, they'll have nothing. If you abstain from hanshi powder, you can live a carefree life for another 7 or 8 years. If you don't, you won't live past 7 or 8 months. If you think about it this way, don't you feel that you're at a disadvantage? You could have lived a carefree life for a few years, but now you'll die in a few months. Fengzhen was speechless. The beauty isn't yours, the delicacies aren't yours, the wine isn't yours, and the gambling money isn't yours. Tell me, isn't this a loss? Only by living well would one have the strength to enjoy life. If they die, they'll just be a salted fish. So, he really didn't intend to abstain from hanshi powder? Abstain, he must live well and see how this fellow will court his own death. Who asked him to keep saying, you're going to die, and, it's not yours? No matter how he listened, it was unpleasant. Chapter 571. A letter from your lord? What's written inside? Yang Si couldn't help but stretch his neck to look at the letter in Wei Si's hands. He didn't know what was written inside for this person to be so happy. Could it be? He raised his eyebrows. A feeling of gossiping arose in his heart. When he fixed his eyes on the letter, he was instantly disappointed. Isn't it just that Fengzhen is willing to stay? Why, what amazing talent does this person have to make you so happy? Wei Si kept the smile on his face and said seriously, I am not happy because of Zishi's pledge of allegiance. Yang Si was surprised and asked, oh? Then why? Wei Si said, Zishi is usually unrestrained. Almost no one can persuade him to restrain himself. But, he promised my lord to give up hanshi powder. True love, this is, Yang Si's eyes flashed with surprise. He was no stranger to hanshi powder. He heard that if one takes too much of it, they will never be able to live without it. If there is any mistake in the process of taking the powder, it could lead to death. Even so, there are still people who regard it as the standard, because the process of giving up hanshi powder is too painful. Too many people can't take it and choose to continue using hanshi powder to numb themselves. But Fengzhen's promise to give up hanshi powder, what does this have to do with Wei Si being happy? As if he saw the confusion on Yang Si's face, Wei Si smiled and said, giving up hanshi powder isn't something that can be done in a day, he is in for it. After Yang Si heard this, he couldn't help but shiver. So he was happy only because Fengzhen was going to suffer? Why is this fox's heart so black? Wei Si said, Jing Rong doesn't understand. Wait till you really meet Zishi, you will understand. Others worried so much for his body, but the person himself didn't care. He wasted his energy, how could he not be angry? Now that Fengzhen is in for it, if Wei Si wasn't happy for a while, he would be letting down his worries in the past. But, he flattened the curvature of his lips and looked at the letter in his hands with a gloomy gaze, his brows carrying some doubt. Yang Si asked him, what's wrong with you? Wei Si replied calmly, I just didn't expect Zishi to take the powder for 4 years. Yang Si thought it was something serious and said, You've taken the powder for 4 years, yet you still have the energy to seek death. You don't know how to take care of yourself. You're indeed a tough guy. Wei Si shook his head secretly. That was not what he meant, but he could not explain it clearly to Yang Si. In his past life, he lived in seclusion in Zhongzhao's Bianzhou and maintained correspondence with Fengzhen. He remembered that when Fengzhen first came into contact with Hanshi powder, he was already over 30 years old. How old is he now? He had actually been consuming the Hanshi powder for 4.5 years and he was already addicted to it. It was really puzzling. Speaking of which, he seemed to have overlooked something. A thought flashed across Wei Si's mind and he came to his senses in an instant. Hanshi powder. This thing was indeed popular among the gentry clans, but at that time, the 9 states and 5 countries were already in a dispirited and hopeless state. Some of the nobles from the gentry clans who led a befuddled life used Hanshi powder to numb themselves. The effect of the upper class was similar to that of the lower class, and Hanshi powder was spread everywhere, and once it was spread out, it could not be stopped. Calculating the time, it should be 3 to 5 years later before the Hanshi powder is truly spread and abused by others. In his previous life, Fengzhen had heard that Hanshi powder could strengthen his physique and that was why he consumed it. To him now was merely seeking death for the sake of enjoyment. Before that, Hanshi powder was only popular among the gentry clans within a small circle, it had never been so widespread. But now? Recalling the assessment a few years ago, the scholar who participated in the assessment took off his clothes and molested him in public. Wei Si's face turned pale. Uncontrollably, Master Chen's words surfaced in his mind. Hanshi powder spread many years ago might have something to do with the evildoer who stole the fate of Dongqing. After consuming Hanshi powder for 4 years, the addiction has already formed. To completely kick the habit, one would have to suffer a lot. In his previous life, Fengzhen had only consumed Hanshi powder for 1 to 2 years. Afterwards, Jiang Pengji forced him to quit. According to Fengzhen's own recollection, the process of quitting was extremely painful. It caused him to develop a conditional fear towards the 3 words Hanshi powder. In this life, he had consumed Hanshi powder for 4 years, wouldn't the pain of quitting be multiplied? Yang Si said sarcastically, "You can gloat, that Fengzhen is really unlucky to know you." The addiction of Hanshi powder was not as strong as drugs, the probability of completely quitting was also high, but the withdrawal reaction was not something a normal person could endure. The strong desire in the mind, the pain in the body, under the double pressure, only by relying on willpower could one get through it. Runny nose and tears, muscle cramps, stomach cramps, headache and nausea, Fengzhen had tried to quit, but the feeling was too painful. He endured it for a while and gave up, choosing to bow down to the Hanshi powder master. Now, how could Jiang Pengji allow him to give up? Fengzhen did not know what Jiang Pengji did to him. When the addiction of Hanshi powder hit him, other than his pair of eyes that could move and his brain that could think, his entire body felt weak and powerless. He could not speak when he opened his mouth, but his consciousness remained clear and he could feel the movement in his body. The addiction flared up, from noon to dusk, his sweat had already soaked his clothes several times. Feeling the pain in his body gradually recede, Fengzhen panted heavily, as if he had crawled back from the 18th level of hell. "How do you feel?" Jiang Pengji entered from outside the house. Behind her was a guard who carried a clean set of clothes. Fengzhen laid on the ground, slowly regaining control of his body, but his limbs were still weak, even sitting up was difficult. "I don't want to talk to you." Fengzhen's face was full of sweat, he drowsily closed his eyes, he could not bear to recall the pain from before, he could not bear to recall himself being controlled by the addiction. When the addiction flared up, he thought of hundreds of ways to kill Jiang Pengji, he wished he could drink her blood, eat her flesh, he was even more crazy and cruel than a wild beast. How could he still have an ounce of rationality? "I got someone to prepare some light detoxifying food for you, eat some after you wash up." In the next month, the addiction flares up more frequently, and the duration is longer. If you don't have enough stamina and energy, I'm afraid you won't be able to withstand it. Jiang Pengji said, "You should also be thankful that you were rather disciplined when using Hanshi powder, You did not abuse it recklessly. Fengzhen had used hanshi powder for more than 4 years, but the amount every time was small, and the interval was longer. It was only in the last year that it became more frequent. The dosage also increased. If not, he would have died a long time ago. He could not be more dead. Jiang Pengji's mental brain was strong. She could secretly help him to stay awake, and it was safer for him to pass the withdrawal period. After Fengzhen heard this, he could not help but tremble. It was so painful once, and there would be more flare-ups in the next month. How could he withstand it? Can I regret it? He did not want to quit. No, you can endure it for a while. The future will be bright. Jiang Pengji looked at Fengzhen, who was lying on the ground like a salted fish. She smiled and said, I brewed some wine recently. It's much stronger than the wine you usually drink. When you control your addiction, I'll treat you to 2 cups. Wine. Chapter 572. Beautiful. Fengzhen took a hot bath and changed into soft, airy, and light clothes. As he had been taking the hanshi powder all year round, his skin was very delicate. A slight abrasion would leave an obvious red mark, and it was extremely painful. That was why he could only wear old and worn-out clothes. After taking a shower, his long hair was still wet. He sat down and drank a cup of the wine Jiang Pengji brewed. As soon as the wine entered his stomach, he felt that it was incomparably hot. The warmth spread to his limbs and bones, and the tipsy feeling rushed straight to his brain. There's actually such a strong wine in this world? Beautiful. At first, he was not used to it, but after a while, the aftertaste was endless. The tipsy feeling made his whole body feel light. Awesome, it felt even better than hanshi powder. The corners of Jiang Pengji's eyes twitched. The audience in the streaming room expressed their worries. Shuzhong Zi Yuyen Ryu, streamer, are you sure it's enough for this guy to abstain from hanshi powder? Why don't I quit drinking too? Jianghu, not only must he abstain from alcohol, he must also abstain from gambling and lust. The live stream should spread positive energy. A guy like Fengzhen, who has lost his inhibitions, should be reformed. She might as well let him become a monk and forget about the 5 skandhas. Luo peanut candy, ha ha ha, although I should sympathize with him, I really can't help but feel sorry for Fengzhen. Little angel, if he hadn't met the host, Fengzhen would have been able to do whatever he wanted. He would have been able to court death however he wanted. But now, sigh, he has no choice. Meeting the host might have been the biggest disaster of Fengzhen's life. Jiang Pengji said, alcohol can harm the liver easily, so you shouldn't drink too much. Just drink half a bottle today. She poured the rest of the wine into her own bowl and drank it all in one gulp. My wine. Just as he reached out to stop her, there were only a few drops of wine left in her bowl. It happened so quickly that Fengzhen couldn't react in time. Jiang Pengji sneered. That's mine. Fengzhen gritted his teeth and said, how can you be so despicable? He hadn't had enough. Jiang Pengji said, do you want more? Just endure the next craving. Fengzhen, I have a saying, you are very arrogant. Does your father know? I don't know if I should say it or not. Lu Shi, come back here. Just as Jiang Pengji had said, it was very painful in the early stages of giving up the powder. It would act up frequently, but once it was over, it would be a whole new world. In the beginning, it would only flare up once every 1 or 2 days, and each flare up for more than half a day. Gradually, it became a flare up every 3 to 5 days, and it would flare up for an hour. 2 months later, Fengzhen's vitality slowly improved. His cheeks had a healthy flush, and the green color on his lips had faded. Even his thin cheeks had gained some weight. He had yet to completely abstain from hanshi powder, but when his addiction flared up, he no longer needed Jiang Pengji's special care. Just based on his willpower, he could withstand the withdrawal symptoms and resist the urge to consume hanshi powder. This was considered a huge improvement. Of course, based on the ridicule from the audience in the streaming room, perhaps the appeal of fine wine to Fengzhen was far greater than the hanshi powder. The benefits of quitting the powder were obvious. This was something Feng Zhen was most familiar with. Previously, his brain was like glass that was covered with dirt that was difficult to remove. Now that the dirt was gone, sunlight could pass through the glass without any obstruction. His thoughts were unprecedentedly clear, and his thinking speed was much faster than before. Even his memory had recovered a lot. One had to know that after consuming hanshi powder, his brain was somewhat sluggish and his memory was weak. He would often forget some unimportant things after hearing them. Jiang Pengji saw that he had recovered well. She directly brought him to the government office and assigned Dian Yen to be his temporary guard. Even if he ran to the toilet, Dian Yen had to wait outside the toilet and was not allowed to leave easily. This made Feng Zhen furious. Jiang Pengji said, "Isn't it because I'm afraid that your addiction will suddenly act up? With Dian Yen watching over you, I'm more at ease." Feng Zhen said, "Who would believe your words?" Was it because she was concerned about him? The hanshi powder he had on him had been wiped clean. Even if he wanted to use it, he couldn't. Occasionally, his addiction to alcohol would kick in and he would want to drink a little or sneak out to play with girls, drinking and having fun. Not long after, Dian Yen would appear with a pair of glaring eyes. He looked at him without saying a word, not saying a word, just looking at him. Even if Feng Zhen was thick-skinned, he was too embarrassed to continue hugging girls. Was this concern? After a while, he was almost scared to the point of impotence. Jiang Pengji said seriously, "The autumn harvest has just ended. Fengyi County has to be busy with the matters of getting through the winter. Whether it's the people's livelihood or the army's training, they come one after another. At such a time, you're enjoying yourself alone. What will others think? After you're done with this, you can play as much as you want. I'll reimburse all your expenses. How about it? That good?" Feng Zhen was suspicious, but Jiang Pengji was too sincere. He couldn't help but choose to believe her. Feng Jin clicked his tongue. His lord's painting skills were even more exquisite. Feng Zhen still didn't know the fear of working overtime. However, he had secretly seen how Feng Zhen's addiction acted up. Now that he hadn't completely kicked the addiction, would there be any slip-ups if he was allowed to handle official matters? Jiang Pengji said, "It's all right. Don't be fooled by his sickly appearance. He has too much energy. Once he's idle, no one knows what he's thinking about. It's dangerous for his addiction to act up. Let him work hard in the government office and waste his energy. I guarantee that he won't even have the energy to think about what hanshi powder is." To put it bluntly, when the addiction flared up in the past, it was because he had nothing better to do. When he's busy, the situation will improve. She was speaking nonsense with a straight face, but Feng Jin didn't dare to agree. Why didn't he know that a heavy workload could help him kick the addiction? It was obviously his lord who was making things up. At the end of November, Gu Xian's trusted aide brought a group of merchants to the Xiangyang district. The items he brought this time were much more than the previous totals. Your servant greets the owner. It was the confidant's first time meeting Jiang Pengji, but the respect on his face was not fake. How's the plan this time? Jiang Pengji discussed in detail with this confidant in the study. The guards and maids around were all cleared away. She even temporarily shut down the streaming room. Gu Xian's confidant was the manager of the treasure house. He said, everything went smoothly. All the colored glass of the Heavenly Palace has been sold to the North Borderlines Business Alliance at 30% of the price. The money and jewels exchanged are all recorded here. Owner, please take a look. Jiang Pengji reached out and received the thick and heavy account book. The records were indeed very detailed. There was not a single discrepancy in the amount. You've worked hard this time. I plan to allocate 200,000 strings of coins to reward the merchant group that transported the goods. Although it was only 30%, the profit was undoubtedly terrifying. 20 sets of glass jewelry were sold at the normal price. The total was 1.83 million strings of coins. The remaining 2,000 sets were sold to the North Borderlines Business Alliance at 30% of the price. The total was 17. 36 million strings of coins. The total was 19 million strings of coins. These were all exchanged for gold, silver, and jewels of equivalent value. There was not much fluctuation. The manager of the treasure house also used more than 100,000 strings of coins to purchase a large amount of sheepskin and wool. It almost emptied out the stock accumulated by the farmers in the north borderline. The manager smiled. This is what a servant should do. Chapter 573. The manager of the treasure house was indeed worthy of praise. Not only could he complete the task perfectly, but he could also keep his heart in the face of millions of dollars without greed. If Jianghu did not reward him well and let him get the reward he deserved, who would work for her in the future? Even if she knew that the manager of the treasure house could achieve this, Gu Xian must have done something secretly, but the reward was clear and she could not be stingy. Therefore, in addition to the 200,000 strings of coins awarded to the caravan, she also took out an additional 20,000 strings of coins from the private treasury to give to the manager. Su Ke had been helping Jianghu to manage the private treasury. He recorded every expenditure and income in detail. Seeing the two payments, even though he was used to seeing his lord's generosity, he could not help but be speechless. A total of 220,000 strings of coins, not 22 strings of coins. Did he know what 220,000 strings of coins meant? He only needed to take out 10,000 strings of coins and he could buy a position as a district magistrate in Dongqing. If he donated 100,000 strings of coins, he could become a county magistrate in name only. If this wasn't a big deal, then what was? Su Ke looked at the two payments and sighed. When he saw the other payment, he was so shocked that he even threw away his brush. The annual income of the national treasury was only 90 to 150 million strings of coins. His lord was just a district magistrate who occupied the entire territory of Fengyi County without a proper reason. Her income in a few months was close to 20 million strings of coins. Su Ke suppressed the urge to scream for a long time. Because of this, he was in a trance and almost floated to the government office of Xiangyang district. Feng Jin looked up and saw Su Ke, whom he had not seen for a few months. He was much thinner than he remembered. He said with concern, looking at Xiaoyu, the matters in Maolin district must be very heavy. If you are too tired, why don't you discuss with the Lord and rest at home for 2 days? Su Ke was stunned and regained his senses. I'm fine. The government affairs in Maolin district were indeed very busy. In the beginning, they were so busy that Su Ke almost forgot how it felt to sleep. Fortunately, he successfully got through that period and everything was on the right track. The following matters were handled by his subordinates according to the regulations. Su Ke only needed to handle some trivial matters and strengthen supervision and inspection. Feng Jin was surprised and looked at Su Ke from head to toe. Su Ke was still wearing the old clothes that his aunt and Xuanmei made for him a few years ago. The old clothes that originally fit him looked empty now. You should eat more. Look, you've lost so much weight. Feng Jin had a lot of work in the past 6 months. Logically speaking, his workload should be reduced by 20%. However, the food in the government office was too good. In addition, he had a virtuous and meticulous wife to take care of him. His face was ruddy and he looked like a flower that had been carefully watered. Su Ke nodded, still looking absent-minded. Before they could say more, unfamiliar footsteps came from outside the government office, accompanied by a tuneless tune. Su Ke frowned. Feng Jin said, "It should be Zisher." Zisher? Su Ke was extremely busy in Maolin district. Occasionally, he had the time to pay attention to the matters in Xiangyang district. Feng Zhen was one of them. It was said that this person was addicted to hanshi powder and his behavior was unrestrained. Just based on this, Su Ke's first impression of Feng Zhen was that he was below the passing grade. Su Ke said, "Feng Zisher?" Feng Jin nodded. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure in a green scholarly robe almost floated in. There was a slight smell of alcohol around him. His eyes were slightly narrowed, and he was humming an unknown tune. He mechanically said good afternoon to Feng Jin, then turned around to deal with his own affairs. Su Ke was a living person, yet he was neglected by Feng Jin. He drank? Su Ke was surprised. The Lord actually indulged Feng Jin so much that she allowed him to drink while working in the government office? Feng Jin let out a long sigh and said, "The Lord asked Dian Yen to keep an eye on him and not allow him to use hanshi powder or drink excessively. I don't know where this person hides the alcohol. He must be drunk during his lunch break every day. However, he does his work very well and has never made a mistake." For Jiang Pengji, as long as her subordinates did not step on her bottom line, she was happy to indulge them and allow them to have their own private hobbies. Feng Jin could drink half a pot of alcohol every day under Dian Yan's pursuit and interception. It was impossible without Jiang Pengji's tacit approval. Feng Jin and Su Ke were both very disciplined in their personal lives. They were models of self-discipline when it came to Feng Jin. Feng Jin and Su Ke definitely didn't approve of his behavior. However, since Jiang Pengji didn't pursue the matter, it wasn't appropriate for them to restrain Feng Jin. The two of them did not purposely lower their voices, so Feng Jin listened openly. He sneered and mocked the two of them. Dian Yan's pursuit and interception were powerful, but there were policies and countermeasures. Hiding a few pots of alcohol to secretly drink was a small matter. Not to mention, his drinking buddy was their lord, Jiang Pengji. It would be strange if Dian Yan found out. He thought proudly. When he lowered his head, he noticed that there were 2 more rolls of information on the table. The seal had not been opened yet. A letter for him? Feng Jin opened it and he sobered up from his drunkenness. Ayaya, oh no. Feng Jin heard the commotion and asked, "What happened?" Feng Jin pinched his chin and said, "I never knew that I was so popular. Everyone was fighting over me." Feng Jin and Su Ke looked at each other in surprise. Someone had written a letter to Feng Jin with the intention of recruiting him. The signature is interesting. Shangyang Feng Huijia. Why is this name so similar to Huayu's? Looking at the date of the signature, it was actually half a month earlier than Wei Ci. It was just that the geographical distance was different. He had received Wei Ci's letter first. Feng Huijia? Wasn't that Feng Jin's younger brother, Feng Ju? Su Ke turned his head. As expected, Feng Jin's expression had darkened. It was as if a thick layer of black paint had been applied to his face. "That's my younger brother," Feng Jin answered. Feng Jin looked at the letter in surprise and then looked at Feng Jin. Feng Ju and Feng Jin were actually biological brothers? Were they really from the same mother? Their temperaments did not seem like it. Compared to the somewhat unrestrained and rebellious Feng Ju, Feng Jin was a proper son of an aristocratic family. His every move seemed to be measured by a ruler. He was neither distant nor close. He did things by the book. It was no wonder that Feng Jin did not associate the two of them together. After a while, he smiled and said, "The person that Huijia is assisting is quite ambitious. Our Lord will not submit to anyone. If the two of them were to fight, there would definitely be a battle. In the future. I'm afraid that the situation of you brothers fighting each other will be unavoidable." Feng Jin's expression darkened even more. He hated Huang Song. He really did not know what kind of magic potion that Huang Song had fed Feng Ju. How could a mere eunuch's son be worthy of Feng Ju's full support? We all serve our own masters. If such a day really comes, Jin will naturally clean up the mess. Feng Jin snorted softly. His impression of Feng Jin had also worsened. Feng Jin did not care. His personality was not suitable for dealing with such righteous gentlemen. Opening the other letter, Feng Jin clicked his tongue. It looks like that Huang Song really does have some skills. Feng Jin raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Chapter 574. Strike first and gain the upper hand? Jiang Pengji occupied the entire territory of Fengyi County. She had 20,000 meticulously trained troops in her hands. Next spring, she would be able to sweep through Wanzhou and take over the entire province. When the time came, she could directly write a memorial and force the Dongqing royal family to confer her the title of governor of Wanzhou. If they sent a large number of troops across half of the north to attack Huang Song in order to nip their enemy in the bud, they would not be able to conquer Wanzhou next year. But they would not be happy to allow Huang Song to grow at the border between the south and the north. Feng Jin said, "It's better to discuss this with the Lord. Should they allow a strong enemy to grow, or should they focus on their own development and strength first?" For Jiang Pengji, she could make the right choice with her eyes closed. "Why are you in such a hurry?" she said with a smile. "I've heard of Qingjing. He's one of Master Yuanjing's 4 disciples. He has a great background, but don't forget that our Zixiao is also Master Yuanjing's disciple. So what if Huang Song has Qingjing's assistance? Can he do whatever he wants? I've also studied at Langyi Academy for a few years, so I have a certain understanding of Qingjing. Him? He's nothing to be afraid of." Hearing words like, "whatever he wants," Feng Jin and Su Ku looked serious. They did not understand, but Feng Zhen, who was very dirty, understood instantly. If Qingjing is incompetent, how could he be valued by Master Yuanjing? Feng Zhen heard Jiang Pengji say that Qingjing was nothing to be afraid of, and he could not help but frown. Feng Zhen had always admired this good friend he had met through Wei Ci. He had also given Qingjing a high degree of recognition. Jiang Pengji's contemptuous attitude made him a little unhappy. "I'm not saying that Qingjing is incompetent. I'm just saying that he and Huang Song are partners. I'm afraid they'll drag each other down." Jiang Pengji said, "I know Huang Song. I've also heard a little about Qingjing from the many students at Langyi Academy. They can go through thick and thin together, but they might not be able to enjoy happiness together. Qingjing is much more hairy than Huayu. Not only does he measure himself by the standards of a gentleman, but he also likes to measure others by the same standards. As for Huang Song, he's a man who doesn't make any major mistakes, but he's full of small ones. TSK. These two people's personalities aren't compatible, unless one of them makes a concession and changes." Jiang Pengji paused at this point and continued, "To put it simply, Qingjing's character requires a tolerant lord who doesn't mind his little criticisms. Huang Song, on the other hand, needs a subordinate who ignores his small problems. Otherwise, it will be a disaster. Of course, everything has a honeymoon period." At this time, Huang Song and Qingjing were still in a state of intense love. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and they were satisfied wherever they looked. Huang Song's influence was small at the moment, so he would naturally exercise caution and restrain himself. Qingjing would also wholeheartedly assist him and do his best to assist him. However, when Huang Song's strength increased and he had more people by his side, Qingjing's advice might be an eyesore. After saying that, she concluded, "We just need to take care of our own matters. Standing firm is far more important than anything else." Feng Zhen said, "If Huang Song is allowed to grow, he will definitely become the Lord's #1 enemy." Jiang Pengji sneered. "My rival? Even if he cultivated for another 8 to 10 years, he still wouldn't be qualified. Even if he could stand up to me as an equal, he still wouldn't be able to defeat me. If we focus on such a strong enemy and neglect more important things, then we'll have our priorities reversed." According to Jiang Pengji's original plan, her battlefield would be the northern borderline and the north of Dongqing. She had no time to care about the southern region for the time being. Without Huang Song, there will still be LV Song or He Song. Only by being strong can we be fearless. Therefore, Jiang Pengji still insisted on her own opinion. Next spring, they would conquer Wanzhou. As long as they occupied Wanzhou, along with the nearby Chongzhou and Hu County that was secretly controlled by Lu Shi, the 3 places would be connected. When the time came, they would have money, food, manpower, and soldiers. Then, they could restrain the cavalry. It was not impossible to defeat the northern borderline. What were the benefits of defeating the northern borderline? Not only were there rich mineral resources, countless gold, silver, and jewelry, but there were also vast territories and commercial areas. There were also countless horse farms and elite warhorses. The horse farms in Dongqing were concentrated in Sangzhou. If they could not conquer Sangzhou or obtain the support of the Meng family in Sangzhou, the cavalry would not be of any use. If they could encroach on the northern borderline, with the horse farms and elite warhorses, would they have to worry about not being able to form a cavalry? With the cavalry, it would be a piece of cake to turn around and attack the forces in Dongqing. Feng Zhen looked at Jiang Pengji seriously. He sighed in his heart. This child had a firm heart and was not moved by external factors. She had the appearance of a wise ruler. This winter, I'll have to trouble you again. After spring, we will prepare for war in Wanzhou. Does anyone have any objections? Feng Jin and Su Ke's expressions changed drastically. They seemed to recall the fear of working overtime last winter. Only Feng Zhen, who did not understand the situation, replied with a smile, "How would I dare to refuse the Lord's request? But, my lord, don't forget our previous agreement." They had to hold on to the support of eating, drinking, and having fun. This was their meal ticket in the future. Jiang Pengji returned a light smile. Of course. How could I forget what I promised Zisher? Su Ke gave Feng Jin a look and inquired about the situation. What shady dealings did the Lord and Feng Zhen have with each other? Feng Jin secretly sighed and mumbled to himself. Su Ke almost choked from laughing. How can you take my lord's words seriously? Su Ke laughed and ridiculed him. My lord often says these things, but she doesn't know that the government office is always busy. They are only busy for a short period of time throughout the year, and that short period of time is a year. How can there be time for him to eat, drink, and have fun? Feng Jin said, Isn't that so? Throughout the year, there are only 7 days of rest before and after the new year. However, during these 7 days, the eateries, gambling dens, brothels, and southern courtyards are all closed, preparing to celebrate the new year with their families. The shops are all closed. I don't know where he is going to enjoy himself. Sai, another one who has been fooled by the Lord. I don't know when he will find out the truth. I'm afraid it won't be too late. The two looked at each other and smiled. They saw the gloating look in each other's eyes. In Qingan district, Wei Ci also received the news that Qingjing had pledged allegiance to Huang Song. He could only lament about fate. Yang Si was a man with sharp eyes. His evaluation of Huang Song and Qingjing was not much different from what Jiang Pengji had said. Wei Ci responded with silence. Yang Si said, You and Qingjing are brothers from the same sect. If you fight in the future, I'm afraid it will be difficult. Wei Ci said indifferently, In terms of difficulty, can it be more difficult than the brothers Huayu and Fengjue? It was not just Feng Jin and Fengjue. The two brothers' eldest brother assisted another person. It was obvious that the three brothers were hurting each other's hearts. Then why do you look sad? Wei Ci did not answer. How could he answer? Could he tell Yang Si that he was silent only because Qingjing had also served Huang Song in his previous life? Qingjing was imprisoned when Huang Song's power was at its peak. Because the ruler and his ministers had different opinions, the conflict became more and more acute. The conflict of many years erupted and could not be resolved. In the end, Qingjing was imprisoned for more than 2 years. When Huang Song was defeated and committed suicide, Qingjing heard the news and finally committed suicide in prison. Chapter 575. Yang Si pinched his chin and said, Don't you have a wide social circle in Langyi Academy? Think of a way to deceive a few more people. Your lord has been studying at Langyi Academy for 3 years. Classmates are more reliable than other relationships. It's better to help him than Huang Song. Wei Ci smiled bitterly. He didn't want to be deceived. It was obvious that it was difficult to recruit him. In Qingjing's previous life, his lord, Huang Song, committed suicide. He also committed suicide in prison. The person who defeated Huang Song was Jiang Pengji. In Lu Zheng's previous life, after his lord became the emperor, she personally led the army. In the end, Her Majesty led thousands of elites to attack and beheaded him. Several princes fought for power, but they were devoured by Jianghu one by one. Lu Zheng chose to surrender for the sake of the people in the city, but he chose to climb the city wall and jump down. He swore before he died, which became a debt of blood that Jianghu couldn't erase. In Han Yu's previous life, although his lord was killed, he accepted the offer of amnesty. He thought he could live out his life peacefully, but when he was middle-aged, his wife and her family secretly plotted a rebellion in the palace. They wanted to change the regime. Unfortunately, he was stupid and the plot was exposed. Han Yu was implicated and committed suicide by swallowing gold. In Wei Si's previous life. Let's not talk about him. Anyway, he killed himself in the end. Thinking about it, the death of Master Yuanjing's disciples was related to Her Majesty. As for the other students who came out of Langyi Academy, they were either dead or injured. Wei Si really wanted to pull all the classmates he knew over. At least he could avoid a bloody battle, right? But with his lord's temper, not all counselors were suitable for her. The relationship between the ruler and the minister was not one-way, but two-way. Only when both were suitable could it be a good story. For example, Huang Song was also a future lord. In Wei Si's previous life, he was only one step away from being the ruler of the world. Master Yuanjing once said that Qing Jing was a talented assistant to the king, a minister who saved the world. When these two met, it should be a strong alliance, but what happened? The relationship between Huang Song and Qing Jing broke down. The latter was imprisoned for more than 2 years and finally committed suicide for his lord. The best talent might not be the best choice. His lord only needed to choose someone who could truly assist her. Everyone has their own aspirations, we can't force them, Wei Si said. He was wholeheartedly thinking for Jianghu. Naturally, he had to choose the best and most suitable helpers for her. He could forget about those who would drag her down. Having been reborn, Wei Si was very open-minded. Yang Si clicked his tongue and said mockingly, I think it's most likely because your master wasn't very popular during his studies, right? Why is it that your lord has more potential than Huang Song, but Qing Jing thinks more highly of Huang Song? Think about your lord's unforgiving mouth. TSK, let's make an irresponsible assumption. Could it be that your lord had severely offended Qing Jing when he was studying in the academy? Wei Si was speechless. He avoided the topic and focused on the trivial. Yimo finished his apprenticeship a long time ago. When my lord was in Langyi County, the two of them should not have met. Since they had never met before, there was naturally no problem of not offending him. However, Jianghu was studying in Langyi. Wei Si spent most of his time outside, but it did not mean that he did not care about the matters of the academy. In terms of popularity, his lord was not very popular in Langyi Academy. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. His lord's character was rather casual. Most of the students in the academy were serious people who conformed to the rules and did things by the book. The latter naturally looked down on Jianghu's casual behavior and style. They even wished they could cover their noses and pass by. However, in terms of friends, she also had friends who were relatively close to her. It was just that most of them were fair-weather friends who drank and drank together. Yang Si rested his chin on his hand and said, Sigh, that's probably not fated. However, I heard that Qing Jing's talent is no less than that of Prime Minister Huangfu of the previous dynasty. Are you really not worried that Qing Jing will help Huang Song gain a foothold in the north? When that time comes, he will be a huge problem. Wei Si said, even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice. What do you mean? They lack money. Wei Si smiled and said, they won't be developing quickly in a short period of time. Their momentum won't be strong. Yang Si said, that may not be true. I've learned about Huang Song from Prince Chengshou. This person's family really doesn't lack money. Huang Song's grandmother was originally a widowed woman from a poor family. Because of her beautiful appearance, Huang Tan took a fancy to her. Huang Tan took her as his wife and adopted the son of the widow's ex-husband, who was Huang Song's father. He treated Huang Song like his own son. Huang Tan doted on Huang Song like his own grandson. Huang Song's father used Huang Tan's connections in the court to do a lot of business deals. He made a lot of money and was very wealthy. Huang Tan's power was overwhelming. He secretly diverted the national treasury. Wasn't the business of a few generations for the sake of their descendants? The savings of Huang Tan and Huang Song's father were ultimately given to Huang Song. Huang Song's family was supported by Huang Tan and had improved a lot in the past few years. Huang Song lacked manpower, but he definitely did not lack money. Now that he had the help of two heavyweights, Feng Zhu and Qing Jing, he would probably not lack manpower in the near future. Wei Ci smiled and said, "What I mean is, Huang Song is not as rich as my lord." In his previous life, Huang Song did develop rapidly and occupied a large piece of fertile land in the north of Dongqing. Wei Ci was really not very worried. Jiang Pengji's starting point in her previous life was very low, but she still managed to rise to the top. Now that she had such a good start, there was no reason for her to fail miserably. Huang Song is very smart. Without absolute confidence, he will not take the initiative to provoke a strong enemy. Wei Ci and Jiang Pengji had the same opinion. They should concentrate on developing their own strength. Only then could they occupy a place in this chaotic world. In the short term, they probably won't go against each other. Not only would they not go against each other, but the two families might even form an alliance and cooperate for a while. Just as Wei Ci had this idea, Qing Jing was also persuading Huang Song to build a good relationship with Jiang Pengji. Qing Jing looked at the entire great universal geographical map and said in a low voice, "The situation in the north seems to have taken shape. Lu Shi has occupied Chongzhou. Hu County is his old nest that he has operated for many years. According to his methods, even if he gives it up, Hu County will still be in Lu Shi's hands. Hu County used to be a barren land and unruly rivers. It did not belong to any prefecture. Its area was slightly larger than the smallest prefecture in Dongqing. Now it was Dongqing's largest county in terms of production. Chongzhou, Hu County, and a third of Wanzhou, which Jiang Pengji occupied. The power in the north was basically in the hands of the Lu family father and son. If my lord wants to compete with Lu Shi, don't fight with him before the situation is developed. You should focus on the south. Although the Lu family father and son occupy the north, the three tribes of the northern borderline are still eyeing the north covetously. They have no time to care about the power in the south. This is a good opportunity for my lord." Huang Song sighed and said, "But Yumo, Prince Changshu and Qinzhou are still competing in the south. We can't afford to offend either of them. When the immortals fought, the mortals suffered. Two skinny camels were still bigger than a horse. Huang Song was really no match for them." Qing Jing smiled faintly and said, "Not necessarily. When Prince Changshu and Qinzhou fought, it was hard to determine a winner, but this also meant that both sides were exhausting each other's strength." Chapter 576. Huang Song thought about Jiang Pengji's character and said with a bitter face, "Even though the three tribes of the north borderline are keeping an eye on him, Lu Shi has a strange temperament and does unexpected things. Last year, he was still the district magistrate of Xiangyang district. Now, he has occupied Fengyi County and doesn't care about the imperial edict. If she were to attack Huang Song on a whim, Huang Song would not be able to defend himself." Qing Jing said, "The news of Anyaina's second princess consort's sudden death has spread to the three tribes of the north borderline. The barbarians have coveted the central plains for a long time. Latest by next spring, when the grass is plentiful, they will gather their troops to attack Dongqing. Isn't Lu Shi's Chongzhou the first to be attacked? Lu Shi was inevitable when the three tribes of the north borderline attacked Dongqing. Now, Chongzhou was probably already actively preparing for war against the cavalry of the three tribes of the north borderline. Why would they care about Huang Song? Lu Shi was Lu Shi's father. If his father was in danger, Lu Shi would probably go bankrupt to resist the cavalry of the north borderline. In comparison, Huang Song did not have such pressure from foreign enemies. Even if Huang Song developed later than Lu Shi, this gap could be made up for. Lu Shi and his son were tied down by the three tribes of the north borderline. Whether they won or lost, the price they would pay would not be small. Under such circumstances, it was still unknown who was stronger between Huang Song and Lu Shi. Huang Song was originally a little depressed, but after Qing Jing's analysis, he gained some confidence and regained his vigor. Seeing this, Feng Zhu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Previously, losing Yangtze was indeed a big blow to Huang Song. Now that Qing Jing had arrived, it could be considered to have made up for the loss. The others were also on their way. Huang Song even sent invitations to his family members. A few talented people came one after another. When everything was on the right track, Huang Song's power would develop rapidly and the Dongqing royal family would be at the end of their road. Huang Song and Qing Jing talked in detail for a long time and felt like old friends at first sight. Qing Jing said, "I heard that Huijia's second brother, Feng Jin, is under Lu Shi?" Huang Song tensed up while Feng Zhu furrowed his brows. Huang Song said, "Everyone has their own master. Huijia is Huijia and Feng Jin is Feng Jin. Yimo, don't be suspicious." Qing Jing smiled and said, "I'm not suspecting Huijia. I'm just worried that Lu Shi will send troops to Wanzhou next spring, and Shangyang County will collapse on its own. If Shangyang County also surrendered, Qingda County would be the only one left and Lu Shi could easily take it." Huang Song was stunned and could not react for a moment. Why? Feng Zhu understood that the key was still Feng Jin. Qing Jing explained, "The Feng family's ancestral home is in Shangyang County, which is now the Shangjing region. The county governor of Shangyang County has an extremely good relationship with the Feng family. Feng Jin is the second son of the Feng clan. With this relationship and the fact that Lu Shi has a powerful weapon in his hands, it's hard to guarantee that the Feng clan won't come forward to persuade him. The Feng family was one of the four noble families of Dongqing and was the local tyrant of Shangyang County. Even the county chief had to submit to them. The attitude of the Feng family could greatly affect the final fate of Shangyang County. If Shangyang County stubbornly defends the city, even if the city is breached in the end, Lu Shi will at least bleed a little. If the city collapses on its own, this person's power will be preserved to the greatest extent." Qing Jing smiled and said, "I am more inclined to think that Lu Shi can take advantage of the situation. The aristocratic families were used to judging the situation and doing things flawlessly. In the face of a powerful army pressing down on their borders, naturally, submitting was the best option. Not to mention that Feng Jin was working under Lu Shi. For the Feng family, the benefits of submitting were far greater than resisting to the death. If they knew that it was impossible to do, they would be brainless and definitely not an aristocratic family." Qing Jing chose Huang Song not only because Huang Song was more in line with his temperament and was closer to the image of a wise ruler in his heart. Another important reason was that Lu Shi seemed to be doing well now, but in reality, he was walking on a tightrope. The slightest sign of trouble could lead to eternal damnation. Were the three tribes of the north borderline just for show? The more glorious Lu Shi was now, the more pressure he would face in the future when he faced the oppression of the three tribes of the north borderline. In comparison, Huang Song was more in line with his expectations. However, all of this was based on the fact that the three tribes of the north borderline had the ability to invade the south. Did the north borderline have the ability to invade the south? Wei Ci smiled without saying a word. At the beginning of the 11th month of the 20th year of Tianwu, there was a horse plague in the northern borders. The war horses died of the disease, and only 1 out of 10 survived. He still remembered that in his previous life, the three tribes of the northern borderline had been sharpening their swords to attack the central plains, but a few Fergana stallions from Shalan had caused an unprecedented large-scale horse plague. Countless warhorses died of the disease, with less than 1 or 2 survivors. The combat power of the cavalry was almost completely destroyed. By the time the 3 tribes of the northern borderline recovered from the blow of the horse plague, the Central Plains was already in full swing, with several feudal vassals supporting them. The 3 tribes of the northern borderline launched a sneak attack on Jiang Pengji's lair behind her. Coincidentally, Qiguan Rang was the one who stayed behind to guard the lair, so the 3 tribes of the northern borderline did not gain much of an advantage. When Jiang Pengji returned from the war, she exploded in anger. She took her weapons and went to the north borderline, temporarily escaping from the chaotic war in the Central Plains. Oh, then the north borderline was dumbfounded by Jiang Pengji's mad dog style of fighting. Her majesty was now more powerful than she had been in her previous life. Once she unified the north, she could take the initiative to attack the 3 tribes of the northern borderline before they could recover. There was a saying that went, "Take advantage of your illness to kill you." Thinking of the rich horse farms and countless mineral resources of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, Wei Si almost smiled until his eyes were squinted. Every time he saw Wei Si smile so viciously, Yang Si could not help but have goosebumps all over his body. On the other side, Jiang Pengji almost exploded in anger. She temporarily did not have time to care about the horse plague in the northern borderline. She only wanted to know which B*TCH had impregnated her White. The war horses had all been gelded, how could White be pregnant? Could it be that the stableman had done something deranged? Stop licking, I'm asking serious questions. Jiang Pengji raised her hand to stroke White's mane, a smile still on her face. She turned her head and stared fiercely at the stableman who was in charge of the stable. White rubbed Jiang Pengji's face innocently, sticking out its tongue to lick her from time to time. Its tone was a little heavy. Jiang Pengji lost all her anger, allowing White to express its affection freely. Since the last battle, Jiang Pengji rarely took White out for a walk. It was no wonder that the little girl missed her so much. She wanted to go hunting today, get some game, and have a barbecue and hot pot with her friends in the government office. The stableman pulled White out. She took a look and almost exploded in anger. Dian Yen nimbly pressed the stableman to the ground and waited for Jiang Pengji's orders. The stableman trembled with fear and said, "My lord, I don't know what happened." Jiang Pengji's gaze shifted to White's belly. She could already see that it was pregnant. She also felt a weak fluctuation in its body. It was obviously pregnant. However, the war horses had all been gelded. White had very high requirements for its partner. Every spring, there were male horses who asked for love, but they were all kicked away by the little girl. It was late autumn now, how could it be pregnant? Jiang Pengji reached out and touched White's belly. She could vaguely feel something. Mammals were much more vigilant during pregnancy. Whoever touched a mare's belly was guaranteed to be rewarded with a hoof. However, White trusted Jiang Pengji very much. Its temper was still docile. Well, this was only limited to Jiang Pengji. To others, it was a tsundere queen. Whoever provoked it, it would kick them. Are there any clean male horses in the stable? Chapter 577. The audience in the streaming room was dumbfounded. They wanted to watch Jiang Pengji hunt and roast game. They didn't know how the plot had developed to this point. Why did she suddenly say that she wanted to seduce a stallion? A friend who lived in the northern grasslands was experienced and explained the reason. Han Meiwa de June, is Lady White going to be a mother? When the bullet screen was posted, everyone was silent for a while. Then, they exploded. Mu Nyo Lu Mi, F***CK. Bring me my 40-meter knife. Which shameless stallion impregnated my daughter White? Did he get my permission? Streamer, you don't have to do anything. I can castrate that shameless stallion. Peepa eats pie pa, no. Wait a minute, our White is a girl. Isn't it a handsome young man? Nuwa is not a Nuwa, Gaga. White is such a handsome horse, isn't it a handsome young man? I really like how it cooperates with the streamer in battle. When it raises its hooves and kicks people, it can shatter a person's sternum with one kick. Such a fierce horse is actually a girl. Yuzeo Shingu, #despise. The streamer is such a fierce guy, but she's a girl. Why can't White be a girl? Jiang Pengji comforted the affectionate White while she questioned the stableman sternly. White was her mount. It wasn't spring now. How could she put a stallion that hadn't been tempered in her White stable? Her Dubai's exclusive VIP stable wasn't something that any horse could stay in. The stableman looked up with a surprised expression. He stuttered, "There is indeed such a stallion, bring it out. I'll lick it myself." Jiang Pengji turned her face away to avoid White's affectionate tongue as she fumed. It was hard to bear a beauty's kindness. After a few rounds, she felt that her hair was about to be licked off by White. The stableman refused to move. Jiang Pengji frowned and asked sternly, "What's wrong? My orders don't work?" Seeing that Jiang Pengji was really angry, the stableman said in fear and trepidation, "Please forgive me, my lord. It's just that horse. That horse is a rare, fine horse. I thought that my lord asked me to put it in the same stable as White in order to match-make the two of them." Jiang Pengji was confused. Huh? In that split second, Dubai's tongue had already lapped a circle around her cheek. This stable driver was also a horse lover. In the past 2 years, he had even treated the mighty and majestic Dubai as his own daughter. Every day, he would cut the freshest and highest quality horse grass for Dubai to eat, so that it could maintain its glossy and beautiful appearance and maintain its healthiest state. More than a month ago, the caravan presented a mixed blood horse from the northern borderline as a tribute. The young man was very handsome. The stableman was also trembling with fear as he asked what to do with the stallion. It was not molted at such an age, so it was obvious that it was kept as a stud to breed better offspring. Jiang Pengji's answer was to put it directly in White's stable, so the stableman did as he was told. After listening to the coachman's aggrieved narration, Jiang Pengji finally recalled the memories of that period of time. Jiang Pengji rubbed the space between her brows with a slight headache. War horses around 2 years old had all been molted. Before the steward of the treasure house presented the horse, he only said that it was a war horse from the northern borderline with excellent bloodlines. Its sire was a Fergana horse from Shalan, but he did not say that the horse had not been molted. War horses that had not been molted had explosive temperaments and were extremely difficult to tame. If it was the spring season, it would be even more difficult to control. Jiang Pengji originally wanted to wait for Li Yun to return before giving him this good horse, but now it seemed that it was impossible. She was not sure how good Li Yun's horsemanship was, and she did not want him to take the risk to tame a wild and untamed horse. The stableman asked with trepidation, "My lord, do I still need to bring Little White over?" Little White? The corners of Jiang Pengji's mouth were slightly out of control. "Bring it over." The stableman did as he was told. When she saw the horse with the word "good" written on it from head to toe, Jiang Pengji finally understood why it was called Little White. When Dubai saw Little White, he took 2 steps forward and rubbed against it. It responded warmly, even its steps were extremely graceful. This horse really hasn't been molted? She had never seen such a graceful and obedient stallion. Little White's build was slightly more muscular than Dubai. Its fur was also snow white without a trace of other colors. Standing beside Dubai, they looked like biological sisters. Seeing Dubai take the initiative, she was momentarily speechless. She was speechless, but the audience in the streaming room could help her ridicule. "Can't think of me my daughter Dubai is indeed a queen. It must have tamed Little White. Casually take one, of course." Actually, at Dubai's current age, she is considered a leftover woman among the horses. Little White seems to be only a little over 2 years old. It's a little fresh meat. The baby of these two must have a very good bloodline. Streamer, please don't break them up. Still sound nice. Generally speaking, war horses in ancient times were molted. They were easy to tame and manage. They would keep the stallions with the best bloodline and in the best condition as stud horses to breed strong offspring. Although Little White is a little delicate, it is still the descendant of a Fergana horse and a war horse from the northern borderline. It may not be pure blood, but it is still the second generation. Streamer, please don't bully it. Jiang Pengji frowned and asked the stableman how much a stallion from the horse farm in the northern borderline cost. The stableman did not know about the situation in the northern borderline, but he had heard about the price of a stallion from the Tsang Prefecture horse farm. A stallion with a good bloodline cost around 100,000 strings of coins. This was a good stallion found from outside. If it was a stallion from the farm, the price would definitely not be so expensive. Jiang Pengji was stunned for a moment. She glanced at Little White. The stallion seemed to be a little afraid of strangers. It shrunk behind Dabai. Jiang Pengji asked, "What about this one?" The stableman said, "I have inquired about it from the caravan. Little White seems to have been bought for 150,000 strings of coins." A stallion worth 150,000 strings of coins? Why does it look so scared and timid? Jiang Pengji took a deep breath and said, "Forget it. I won't do it." After a while, she asked, "You have a lot of experience in raising horses. What do you think of Little White's body? Is it sick? What stallion would be so shy and timid? It was as delicate as a lady from a noble family among horses." Her Dabai, on the other hand, looked like a domineering CEO. Jiang Pengji was really a little worried about a horse from the northern borderline. However, she sensed that its body condition was very good. The stableman hurriedly said, "No, Little White's body condition is excellent." Jiang Pengji was silent for a moment, then she sneered and said, "I have never seen a war horse with such a timid temper." Dabai was pregnant. It was not good for Jiang Pengji to ride it to hunt. She simply asked someone to put a saddle and stirrup on Little White. The stableman said in a panic, "My lord, you can't. This horse has not been tamed. If it accidentally startles my lord." Chapter 578. Did Little White have the ability to throw Jiang Pengji off the horse? Reality proved that it had the heart but not the guts. Animal senses were far stronger than humans. The more intelligent an animal was, the stronger it was. When ordinary people faced Jiang Pengji's aura, they would only feel that this person's aura was as tall as 2.8 meters. She was dignified and unfathomable. But in the eyes of these animals, it was a naked threat, as if they had met their most terrifying natural enemy. Not to mention Little White, a horse that grew up on a horse farm. Even a wild horse would involuntarily be afraid when it met Jiang Pengji. Why did Jiang Pengji like Feng Jin's Changxing so much? Because when children are ignorant, they are as sensitive as animals. Changxing was not afraid of her, but was close to her. Of course she liked it. Similarly, Little White was so obedient, she could not dislike it. Little White knew that a wise man submits to circumstances. It ran fast and steadily, and did not make any mistakes in its commands. Jiang Pengji rode it to hunt. She thought it would be frightened by the prey, but it proved that it was not timid. Small prey occasionally jumped out of the bushes, but it was calm and composed. Its endurance, running speed, and posture, all these qualities did not disappoint its bloodline. Jiang Pengji rode on Little White's back, holding White's reins in her hand. While hunting, she walked White to let it have some fresh air. It stayed in the stable all day, and White was pregnant. If it did not go out to get some fresh air, who could control it if it got angry? After running one round, Little White's performance was satisfactory. Jiang Pengji allowed it to stay in the VIP stable of her White family. Jiang Pengji returned with a full load of prey. It was the season when the prey was plump, and barbecued had a special taste. However, White is pregnant. Keep an eye on it. She instructed the stableman who took care of White, if Little White is restless, separate them. The stableman nodded and bowed, hurriedly agreeing. White was reluctantly led back to the stable by the stableman. Along the way, it looked back 3 times, making Jiang Pengji feel extremely guilty. This was a small episode. Jiang Pengji told Li Yun and the rest about it as an interesting story. The construction of Maolin district, Qingan district, and Jiaoping district was still in full swing. Because they had absorbed a large number of refugees and escaped members of the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group in the past 6 months, in addition to the prisoners of war that they had previously captured, there was no shortage of people in all aspects of construction. Everyone had survived the busiest period, and the rest of the matters could be handled according to the regulations. Qiguan Rang and the rest could finally take a break from their busy schedule and slightly relax. After settling the matters in each district, the few of them sneaked back to Xiangyang district for 2 days. Li Yun was originally busy in Maolin district. Later on, it was decided that Qingan district would be used as a trial district for farming. He was transferred to Qingan district to help out. This fellow is extremely talented in farming. In the past half a year, the reclamation and distribution of wasteland has been completed. Hearing that Dabai was pregnant, and that the stallion was an excellent warhorse with half of the Shalan nation's Fergana horse bloodline, he couldn't help but be tempted. Master, Jiang Pengji flipped the roasted meat and asked, "What's wrong? If Great White gives birth, can I reward the foal it gives birth to?" Just as Li Yun opened his mouth, a sharp gaze focused on him. Which man doesn't love horses? Dabai's quality is obvious. The stallion is a valiant warhorse with the bloodline of the Fergana horse. How bad can the offspring of the two be? For a military general, if he can obtain a warhorse that is full of spirituality, of excellent quality, and is connected to his heart, it will be like adding wings to a tiger on the battlefield. It is hard to find even with money. The moment Li Yun opened his mouth, he reserved a good horse with great potential in advance. He hated himself for not speaking up earlier. Li Yun actually snatched it first. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "All right, if you like it, you can take it away." "Thank you, master." Li Yun's cheeks were flushed with joy. It was unknown whether it was because he drank too much or because he was too happy. A family of people roasting meat in the government office. The scene was too beautiful, and the style was too strange. It was Yang Xi's first time in Xiangyang district. It was also his first time participating in a gathering of this nature. Yes, it was also his first time using the glass grill that was hard to find outside to roast meat. He felt that the value of every piece of meat was elevated. He squinted his eyes and swept his gaze across Jiang Pengji's subordinates. He frowned slightly. Logically speaking, the northern borderline situation was precarious. Why were these people not the least bit nervous? Instead, they ate the roasted meat with gusto. Especially Feng Zhen, who was dressed in old clothes and had drunk so much that his eyes were misty. It was as if his bones had gone soft. He leaned against Wei Ci. Wei Ci sighed. It was not good to push Feng Zhen away. When the roasted meat was almost finished, Qiguan Rang and the others looked at each other. Then, Feng Jin was pushed out. He bowed and said, "Master, according to the news from Chongzhou, the northern borderline has already prepared their troops. How should we deal with them?" The few strategists returned from the other 3 districts not only to eat this roasted meat, but also to discuss countermeasures. Jiang Pengji chewed the meat in her mouth a few times and swallowed it. She said rather straightforwardly, "Different situations call for different measures. What else can we do?" Everyone was speechless. Feng Jin sighed and could not help but say intimately, "Master, don't joke with me. I'm being serious. I'm being serious too. We're having a gathering to eat roasted meat. What's the use of talking about such annoying matters?" Jiang Pengji said nonchalantly. Yang Xi and Feng Zhen subconsciously frowned. So unreliable? Wei Ci smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Master, you have a countermeasure in mind. It's indeed not suitable to do it at this gathering and dampen everyone's spirits." Feng Jin secretly glanced at Wei Ci. His expression was natural, as if Jiang Pengji really had a countermeasure. Jiang Pengji said, "I'm waiting for the news. If the news is true, everyone will have a good time this year. There's no need to worry about the threat from the northern borderline. There's no need for them to find trouble with us next year. In 2 years, we'll take the initiative to find trouble with the northern borderline. It's important to eat and drink and enjoy ourselves to the fullest. Yang Si secretly glanced at Wei Si. He had a feeling that Wei Si and his master had reached an unspeakable tacit understanding. What news is District Magistrate Liu waiting for? Yang Si had not pledged allegiance, so he addressed Jiang Pengji differently from others. News from the racecourse in the northern borderline. As soon as Jiang Pengji's voice fell, a messenger came in from outside. He half knelt on the ground and raised a bamboo slip with both hands as a token. She smiled. There was not a hint of anger on her face. She said, "I'll go take a look." Is it good news or bad news? Opening it, the contents of the letter made her lips curl up. Wei Si asked, "Is it good or bad?" "Of course it's good," Jiang Pengji said. "Now, the northern borderline will not be able to jump around." It was true that the butterfly effect had changed many things, but some symbolic events still happened as promised. Shalan was thousands of miles away from the northern borderline and even further away from the hinterland of the Central Plains. They chose the best Fergana horses from their country to sell to the northern borderline. How could they have known that these horses would be infected with a horse plague during the transportation? The horse plague had an incubation period. A few horses died along the way, but the horse dealers did not notice. They just thought that the horses were not used to the foreign environment. How could they have known that they had been infected? Chapter 579. Due to the special nature of warhorses, most stallions would be castrated. Castrated warhorses were more docile, easier to tame, and easier to control. A small number of excellent stallions would be kept as breeding stallions to ensure that the next generation would be of the highest quality. This generation's king of the northern borderline royal court was not a wise man, but he was ambitious and could listen to the advice of others. Under the advice of the wise man, he integrated the business alliance and tightly controlled the resources of the horse farm in the hands of the royal court. He could not easily sell the warhorses. The former prevented external business impacts and strengthened the local business competitiveness. The latter increased the military strength of the northern border and the prestige and rule of the imperial court. In the past, as long as he had money, he could buy enough good warhorses from the northern borderline horse farm, but now he couldn't. In order to provide the warriors of the northern borderline with better warhorses and improve their overall combat effectiveness, the imperial court of the northern borderline would allocate a sum of money to purchase Fergana horses from Shalan every year. They would then rent these horses to the major horse farms, and the second-generation warhorses that were bred were not allowed to be sold. The 3 tribes of the northern borderline had always relied on cavalry as their main combat power. Relying on this method, their combat power skyrocketed. Before the fall of the Great Xia dynasty, the 3 tribes of the northern borderline treated the Great Xia dynasty as their suzerain while they themselves were their vassal states. They paid tribute to the Great Xia dynasty every year and called themselves their subjects. Now that the Xia kingdom was destroyed, the 9 states were divided into 5 countries. The 4 tribes of Nanman, which used to be a vassal state like the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, had destroyed the royal family of the Nanxing kingdom a year ago and occupied half of the Nanxing kingdom. From being a vassal state, they had turned the tables and occupied the territory of the sovereign state. This made the 3 tribes of the northern borderline much more confident and ambitious. If the barbarians of the 4 factions of Nanman could do it, why couldn't they, the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, do it? Dongqing failed to live up to expectations and was in constant civil strife. It was the best time for the northern borderline to send troops to the Central Plains and conquer the world. In order to cultivate more combat power, the royal court of the northern borderline purchased more Fergana horses from Shalan every year. In the beginning, he only used 1 or 2 horses to test the waters. Now, there were more than 10 or 20 of them. He had planned to buy 35 of them this year. Unfortunately, the Fergana horses were delicate, and some of them died on the way. Even so, the northern borderline still bought 19 Fergana horses and loaned them out according to the size of the farm. Then, according to the usual practice in previous years, the stud farm bred the stallions and mares. Because the management of the stud farm was excellent and the weather in the northern borderline was not bad, the maras were in heat all year round. The Fergana horses sent by Shalan were all around 4 years old, which was the golden age for breeding. The Fergana horses rented by the northern borderline imperial court had a time limit, and the horse farm did not dare to waste time. This was the busiest time of the year for the stud farm. Of course, the ones who were busy were the slaves who took care of the horses. There was only a very small amount of time that they could take a break from their busy schedule. 3 to 5 slaves gathered together and whispered. "Don't you think it's strange? Why do these Fergana horses feel particularly dull this year?" Another slave said, "It's because they're not used to the climate. Besides, they've always been sent in spring or summer in the past. This year, they're late, so naturally they won't be as strong." That's true, it was not easy to be a stud horse. There were hundreds and thousands of maras that were of the right age to be pregnant, but the stud farm was only allocated 1 or 2 Fergana horses. About half a month later, the slaves taking care of the Fergana horses were horrified to find that one of the horses had fallen to the ground without warning. They called the veterinarian, and only then did they discover that the horse was seriously ill. It was fine before, how could it? The slaves were so anxious that they broke out in a cold sweat, and their teeth chattered in fear. As slaves of the stud farm, their value was not even as important as the mane of a Fergana horse when they were tied up in a bundle. Now that their precious Fergana horses were sick, they would not be able to absolve themselves of the blame even if they died 10,000 times. Something even more worrying happened. This seriously ill Fergana horse was still vomiting blood, and its skin was always showing bruises and bruises. The stud farm thought that the slaves had secretly injured the Fergana horses, and was furious. They immediately disposed of a group of slaves. The veterinarian did everything he could to treat it, but the horse still died of illness. The corpse soon rotted and stank, and the smell was extremely strong, attracting many insects and mosquitoes. A Fergana horse was worth as much as 400,000 to 500,000 strings of coins. Who wouldn't feel heartache for losing so much money when one died? Because these Fergana horses were rented from the northern borderline imperial court, the stud farm had to take full responsibility and compensate for the losses. In the end, none of the slaves taking care of the Fergana horses could escape. They were all brutally killed and buried with the horses. The 3 tribes of the northern borderline had the custom of sky burial. The Fergana horse was diagnosed by the veterinarian as suffering from a strange disease, so it was also given a sky burial. This seemed to be the beginning. Just half a month after the death of this Fergana horse, news came from another stud farm that a Fergana horse was seriously ill. The symptoms of the second horse were exactly the same as the first one. There had never been a horse plague in the northern borderline, so they naturally didn't think of the symptoms of these 2 sick horses in this direction. Even if they did, they would deny it. As far as they knew, horses with horse plague would get sick in 7 or 8 days at most, and those with acute symptoms would show signs of serious illness in 1 or 2 days. They had only heard of horse plague from the horse traders of Shalan, and there was no such thing in the northern borderline. These Fergana horses had traveled thousands of miles from Shalan for almost a year, and after arriving at the 3 tribes of the northern borderline, they had been breeding at the stud farm for more than half a month. There was no sign of illness at all, and at most, they were a little listless. If it were a horse plague, they would have died a long time ago. Little did they know that there were different kinds of horse plague. The horse plague in Shalan was acute, and symptoms were bound to appear within half a month of infection. The mortality rate was more than 90%. This time, the source of the horse plague was not in Shalan, but on the way. Even the horse traders of Shalan didn't know when they got infected. The incubation period was extremely long. Depending on the physical fitness and resistance of the horse, the incubation period ranged from 1 to 4 months. Of course, once the disease broke out, it meant that the condition was so serious that it was impossible to save it. For example, the first Fergana horse that died of illness. Its internal organs were almost full of extravasated blood and thick fluid, and its skin was covered with large areas of extravasated blood. Therefore, the owner of the stud farm suspected that the slaves secretly vented their anger on the Fergana horse and beat it until it was seriously injured. More importantly, the carcass of this sick horse needed to be cremated, otherwise insects, mosquitoes, and flies would spread the disease to other hosts. For example, horses, mules, and donkeys were all susceptible hosts. Among them, pregnant maras and weak young horses were the most susceptible. With the second one, there would naturally be a third and a fourth. There was almost no time gap. At this moment, the breeding at the stud farm was basically coming to an end. The successive deaths of the Fergana horses attracted the attention of the royal court of the northern borderline. The king of the royal court ordered a thorough investigation of the matter. It was only then that everyone remembered the horse traders of Shaolin, except that they had already left 2 months ago after receiving the money. Before they could investigate, all kinds of bad news came from the stud farm. The 19 horses bought at a high price all died, leaving no survivors. Each of the 19 Fergana horses cost between 450,000 to 600,000 strings of coins. For them, the royal court allocated at least 10 million strings of gold, silver, and jewelry. Now that they had all died after just one round of breeding, who would compensate for this loss? Faced with this loss, the king of the royal court of the northern borderline roared in anger. Chapter 580. The source of horse plague was spread by insects and flies, and the host's physical constitution directly affected the incubation period. Northern borderline advocated sky burial, and the corpses of the Fergana horses were left to rot on the ground and become food for insects, birds, and beasts. The stud farm was not a clean and dust-free place, and the slaves would not be on guard against those small insects. It was conceivable how terrible the horse plague would be if it really spread. The royal court of northern borderline was cheated of a huge sum of 10 million strings of coins by the horse dealers of Shaolin. Fortunately, all the maras had been bred, and more than 1,000 maras were found to be pregnant successfully, barely recovering some losses. Otherwise, the royal court of northern borderline would have really suffered a great loss this time. However, the bad luck did not end there. About half a month later, the previously pregnant maras had a high fever, and their whole body seemed to be swollen. They breathed like a cow, and occasionally coughed violently. Their nostrils were wide open, and a lot of mucus, with foamy liquid flowed out. It was obviously seriously ill. The slave taking care of the pregnant maras was so scared that he hurriedly reported the matter. The slave trembled, and his body shook like a sieve. He kept begging for mercy, for fear that he would also be secretly dealt with. Could it be that the disease of the maras was caused by the Fergana horses? The owner of the stud farm looked gloomy. The maras lay on the ground of the stable, breathing heavily, but their bodies were swollen as if they had been filled with water. They were so sick that even a blind man could see that the pregnant horse was seriously ill. Can it still be saved? The veterinarian shook his head helplessly with a bitter face. Ordinary minor diseases could be treated, but it was really impossible to save a fatal disease like this. The owner of the stud farm secretly clenched his teeth, and his eyes seemed to be shooting venom. They had already lost too much money on the Fergana horses. Fortunately, the chances of the maras getting pregnant were relatively high. If they could successfully give birth, the losses on the northern borderline would be even. After breeding and breeding for 3 to 5 years and training them into powerful warhorses, they would be able to recoup their previous losses. What about now? The pregnant maras that had been carefully taken care of like gold were sick, and the condition was so serious that even the veterinarian could not save them. The maras died, and the fetus in their wombs could not be saved. They had lost a mare of good bloodline and a colt with more potential. Thinking of this loss, the owner's heart was about to break. Before he could recover from this blow, the slaves in another area came to report that there was another pregnant horse that was seriously ill. What? The world spun, and even the owner's voice changed. After a while, he resisted the urge to roar and smash things. He hurriedly said to the vet, "Go and take a look." It was the same illness. Seeing the second sick mare, the owner's heart sank, and he quickly said, "Check all the pregnant horses." It was obvious that the disease of the Fergana horse had spread to these maras. If it was discovered early, they might still be able to save it. However, the symptoms during the incubation period of the horse plague were mild. At most, there would be some mental exhaustion. The pregnant horse's mood was not high to begin with, so it was really difficult to judge. In the end, the veterinarians still found 5 sick horses with symptoms, and they were urgently quarantined from the stud farm. This matter once again alarmed the entire royal court of the northern borderline. The king of the northern borderline roared in anger, and his subordinates silently endured the others' verbal attacks. Wise man, Wu Liba had previously been shelved by the king of the northern borderline for nearly a year because he opposed the extravagant atmosphere. The king of the northern borderline could indeed listen to advice, and he was ambitious, but deep down, he was still a man of the northern borderline, and he worshipped force more. He was especially disdainful of Wu Liba's wise man and great principles. What was so great about having a glib tongue? In addition, he had a temperament that liked to enjoy and indulge in extravagance. Wu Liba opposed the extravagant atmosphere of the northern borderline aristocrats, and wasn't that the same as controlling his daily behavior? In the past year, Wu Liba had been given the cold shoulder by the king of the northern borderline, and was even berated from time to time. However, the king of the northern borderline's brain was still there, and he did not do anything too overboard. He only let Wu Liba relax his work. Now, in the face of these dangers, he thought of this good helper again. Do you have a plan, my dear subject? Wu Liba thought for a while, and said in a low voice, Your Majesty, your subject thinks that we should be more ruthless and abandon those pregnant horses. When the king of the northern borderline heard this, he almost fainted in anger. He asked with all his sincerity, and the other party gave him such a lousy idea? Abandon all the pregnant horses? Why didn't they just go to heaven? The Fergana horses that Shalon bought had already cost them 10 million strings of coins. Those Maras were also warhorses with the best bloodline in the northern borderline. Although they were not as expensive as the Fergana horses, they were still worth 30 to 50,000 strings of coins, or even more. The total number of Maras that were successfully pregnant was more than 1,500, and the number of Maras that were not pregnant was 2 to 3,000. If all the Maras that had been touched by the Fergana horses were to be slaughtered, the loss would be so great that it would be heartbreaking. Get lost. After catching his breath, the king of the northern borderline was so angry that he grabbed something beside him and threw it at Wu Liba. What kind of lousy idea was this? The 19 Fergana horses had already cost them a huge loss of 10 million strings of coins, and those Maras were also worth 40 to 50 million strings of coins. In addition to the foals of the Fergana horses in their bellies, if they were to abandon all of them, the 3 tribes of the northern borderline would suffer a loss of 70 to 80 million strings of coins this time. Which of the Maras that could be kept as breeding horses were not the cream of the crop? Now that they were all killed, how many elites would the warhorses of the northern borderline lose? Wu Liba was hit squarely, and his neatly combed small braids became messy. He did not say a word and bowed in silence. He also knew why the king of the imperial court was so angry. The loss was simply too great. But he had a hunch that if he did not do this, perhaps the loss in the future would be even greater. However, the king of the imperial court would not agree to his suggestion, and the owners of the major horse farms would not agree to it either. The king of the northern borderline ordered the horse farms to keep the news under wraps so that the determination of the warriors of the northern borderline would not be shaken. At the same time, he ordered his men to quickly get rid of the sick horses and treat them, trying to recover as much of the loss as possible. After a while, his hair had turned quite a lot white. However, the insects and flies that had been feeding on the corpses of the sick horses had already spread, and it would be difficult to suppress them again. Among the sick horses, 9 out of 10 died of illness, and the remaining 1 survived, but the foal in its belly had also died in its belly. The bad news was far from over. Not only did the pregnant horses show signs of illness, but even the foals in the horse farms were having problems. During those few days, the horse farms of the northern borderline were in a state of panic, and the royal court of the northern borderline was filled with all kinds of angry roars from the king. The horse farms were heavily guarded, and not a single word leaked out. The spies that Jiang Pengji sent did not find out the specific situation in the horse farms, but to her, this bit of information was enough. Chapter 581. Wei Ci opened it and read it. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. His dark eyes were filled with some joy. He passed the scroll to Fengzhen, who was closest to him. Fengzhen leaned on his shoulder as if he had no bones. He wanted to put all his strength on him. Wei Ci poked him with the bamboo scroll. Everyone's eyes shifted to Fengzhen. Only then did the latter secretly curse Wei Ci for being sinister. He took it and opened it. Fengzhen raised his eyebrows slightly. Although he did not have the ability to predict the future, judging from Jianghu and Wei Ci's attitudes, he could probably guess something. Something happened to the horse farm in the north borderline? Fengzhen did not know about the horse plague, but he vaguely figured out the truth when he read the contents of the scroll. Yang Si said, "What? Something happened to the horse farm in the north borderline?" With that, his suspicious gaze fell on Wei Ci. He suddenly remembered that this guy had once kept him guessing. Everyone was deeply worried about Princess Anyina's death. They were afraid that the three tribes of the north borderline would use this as an excuse to attack the unstable Dongqing. Only Wei Ci was confident and not worried at all. He even had the attitude of watching a good show. Could it be that he already knew? Yang Si took the scroll from Fengzhen's hands and read the contents quickly. The more he read, the more confused he became. It only says that the horse farm in the north borderline is heavily guarded. There is no other information. Why are you so sure that something happened to the horse farm? It could be that the north borderline has drawn up a battle plan and increased the security of the horse farm to prevent enemy spies. You must know that the horse farm is the lifeline of the north borderline. Could it be that you evil people deliberately went to the north borderline to add something to the feed of the war horses? The north borderline relied too much on cavalry. The ratio of infantry to cavalry was 1:2 or even higher. They wanted to make the entire army cavalry. If the cavalry did not have powerful war horses, could they still be considered cavalry? The horse farm in the north borderline was considered an important strategic resource for the three tribes of the north borderline. If something happened here, the combat power of the cavalry would be almost useless. It was not that the cavalry did not have the ability to fight without horses, but that the cavalry of the north borderline was more inclined to fight on horseback. Without war horses, the north borderline army would not have any advantage when fighting against the Dongqing army. They might even be at a disadvantage because of Dongqing cities. It was not that Yang Si could not see the trick. He just could not believe that there was such a coincidence in the world. Not long ago, the north borderline was still sharpening their knives to conquer Dongqing. Immediately after, something happened to the horse farm and the war horses. Wasn't this a joke? Jianghu smiled and said, "Jingrong, you must be joking. The stables in the north borderline are heavily guarded. If I had the ability to tamper with the horse's feed, why didn't I just send someone to assassinate the king of the northern borderline? This is just my guess. Whether it's true or not, we just need to wait patiently." Yang Si frowned. Recalling Wei Ci's previous attitude, he felt that this matter was not that simple. Jianghu and Wei Ci had the same temperament. Their habit of keeping people in suspense made people want to beat her up. Yang Si put on a fake smile and said, "Magistrate Lu is so confident. Something must have really happened to the Beijiang stud farm." In the time it took to speak, the letter had already been circulated among the crowd. They were more inclined to Yang Si's view. The reason why the Northern Kingdom increased their surveillance of the horse farm might be to guard against spies from other countries. As for an accident at the stud farm, what were the chances of that happening? He always felt that things couldn't be so coincidental. The northern borderline was about to send troops south, and the cavalry was crippled. However, there was no shortage of coincidences in the world. The king of the northern borderline angrily rejected Wu Liba's suggestion to slaughter the Mares. Instead, he hoped that the veterinarians could control the horse plague. In the end, there were war horses dying of illness every day. Batches of pregnant horses died. The atmosphere in the northern borderline's royal court became more solemn by the day. It was previously said that the incubation period of the horse plague was related to the host's physical fitness. Pregnant horses and foals were the easiest to be infected. Naturally, the first to break out of the horse plague were also the pregnant horses and foals. Even though the northern borderline had been wealthy all these years, they were still shocked by the large-scale horse plague. The horse farm was not only related to the lifeline of the northern borderline's army, but it was also related to their economic lifeline. Every time they lost a pregnant horse or foal, their losses would increase greatly. In less than half a month, the number of dead maras had reached a terrifying 2,500, and the foals were even more severely injured. At this time, the king of the northern borderline could no longer hold on. He chose to follow the wise man, Wu Liba's suggestion and slaughter the horses that had come into contact with the sick horses. However, it was too late. Other than the horses in the horse farm having problems, the ordinary horses of the herdsmen were also showing signs of illness. Upon receiving the news, even though the king of the northern borderline was used to seeing storms, he could not help but be stunned on the spot. Report: when it rains, it pours. When a ship is late, it is hit by a headwind. There was no worst, only worse. King, sick horses were found in the warhorse stables. What? The king of the northern borderline was shocked. He slammed the table and stood up. Who knew that his movement was too fast and the scene in front of him was unclear? The officials' eyes were filled with fear. One by one, they stepped forward to support the king's strong body that had collapsed. If the horse plague had only spread in the horse farm, the northern borderline could have covered up the news. However, the source of the disease was insects and flies. The people did not notice that these small things carried the source of the horse plague. How could they prevent it? When the herding horses of ordinary farmers also discovered the same illness, the news could no longer be hidden. Chongzhou and the northern borderline shared a border. Lu Shi was the first to receive the news. War horses, dying in large numbers? Lu Shi was so shocked that he could not speak. The secret agent said, "Yes, this news can no longer be hidden. The number of warhorses dying from the disease is increasing every day. It is said that the sick warhorses often die from the disease. The mortality rate is extremely high. My lord, there are many warhorses in Chongzhou. Should we take precautions? If the horse plague was allowed to spread to Chongzhou, they would not even have the strength to cry." The northern borderline occupied the horse farms with abundant grass and bred countless warhorses. However, the warhorses in Dongqing came from Tsangzhou. Tsangzhou was under the control of the Mengs. No one knew what was wrong with the Mengs. In recent years, they had been finding trouble with Lu Shi and competing with him. In Dongqing, if one wanted warhorses, one could not offend the Mengs. Therefore, Lu Shi, who had offended the Mengs, could not get his hands on the Tsangzhou warhorses. The warhorses in Chongzhou all came from the northern borderline. If these precious warhorses died from the disease, they could only rely on their two legs to fight in the future. Lu Shi deliberated and said, "Of course, we must not let the sick horses enter the country. This matter, send a secret letter to inform Lanting." A large number of warhorses from the northern borderline dying from the disease was a good thing for Dongqing. Lu Shi was the magistrate of Chongzhou. If the northern borderline attacked Dongqing, the first place they would take care of would be Chongzhou. One could imagine how much pressure he would be under. Now, with the blessing of their ancestors, the northern borderline had met with bloody misfortune. Lu Shi felt that he could not help but laugh out loud in his bed in the middle of the night. Of course, was the misfortune of the northern borderline over just like that? Chapter 582. The three tribes of the northern borderline were originally scattered in the form of many ethnic groups and tribes. They chased after rivers and herded horses. There were always disputes and fights between each tribe. Later, a tribe suddenly rose up with the support of the last emperor of the Great Xia dynasty. It took decades for them to unify the major tribes of the northern borderline. This powerful tribe was the Chang tribe. It was said that they were the remaining descendants of the Jianghu tribe. They were the most powerful, populous, and wealthy tribe among the 3 tribes of the northern borderline. The royal court of the 3 tribes of the northern borderline was different from the Central Plains. The power structure was even more complicated. If it was the royal court of the Central Plains, if the emperor was muddle-headed and immoral, the people would mostly choose to tolerate it. If the ministers could not persuade them, they would mostly turn a blind eye or do whatever the emperor wanted. But in the northern borderline, the situation was different. If the king of the royal court was incapable, the elders of the 3 tribes had the right to use their respective powers to depose him and elect a new king. Wu Liba had long suggested to the king of the royal court to slaughter the Maras that had come into contact with the Fergana horses of Shalan, but the king had hoped for a fluke. As a result, the horse plague had enough time to spread and cause immeasurable losses to the major horse farms. Who was to blame for this? Before the king of the northern borderline consolidated the horse farms, the major horse farms were owned by the prominent nobles of the northern borderline. The nobles were willing to let the horse farms be under the control of the royal court because it was profitable. Now that the king's wrong decision had caused them to suffer such a huge loss, how could the powerful nobles take it lying down? When the news of Lu Shi reached the Xiangyang district, the 3 tribes of the northern borderline were already fighting amongst themselves. The prestige of the royal court had suffered a huge blow. Jiang Pengji wore a slightly thicker hemp garment. She sat by the ridge of the field and wore a bamboo hat to block the sun. Although there was a drought this year, the harvest was good. Last year, when the Xiangyang district was conquered, a large amount of wasteland was cultivated in one go. Almost every household was given more than 10 mu. After experiencing the joy of the harvest, the people were burning straw to make the fields more fertile. Jiang Pengji listened to the secret report quietly and looked up at the sky. It was nearing the end of autumn. According to previous years, the first snow should have fallen. Jiang Pengji said calmly, "Don't worry. When the first snow falls, the horse plague in the northern borderline will be suppressed. However, the losses that have already occurred cannot be recovered. Tell father that if he has the ability, he should try his best to sow discord within the northern borderline. The great king of the northern borderline has made a serious mistake in his policies, causing huge losses to many aristocratic horse farms. I think he is also full of bruises now, right?" During that time, Jiang Pengji was either busy at the carpentry workshop or working in the fields. The audience in the streaming room thought she was going to change her profession. Now that Lu Shi's secret envoy had arrived, everyone seemed to be on steroids. Enian Chu Zhong, ha 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 ha. I can laugh at this joke for a year. The 3 tribes of the north borderline wanted to invade Dongqing, but God didn't give them face and coldly threw them a horse plague. Great, now even the king of the imperial court will be chased down. Stir-fried mushroom, the 3 tribes of the north borderline don't even have the right time, yet they still have the courage to attack Dongqing. Who gave them the courage? Liang Jingru? But now, the horse plague had come, and the warhorses were dying one after another. I have checked with Baidu. Ha ha ha, the ancient warhorses are really expensive. The horse farms of the north borderline were almost wiped out. How much money did they lose? Lori Yingtianqiang, no, they did lose a lot of warhorses, which are very expensive when converted into money. But you have to know that warhorses are not currency, nor are they liquid funds. The losses of the 3 tribes of the north borderline were actually not that huge. If the warhorses of the north borderline could be sold, the price to others would definitely be high, but it can't be said that the warhorses were worth that much. The 3 tribes of the north borderline owned horse farms of all sizes, and they had the final say on the price. Outsiders didn't know the actual cost of a warhorse. Jin Tian Kaya Hizi, that's true. We calculated their losses based on the price of the warhorses. If we calculated it based on the cost, the losses would definitely not be as big as we thought. But it shouldn't be much different. Anyway, it was a huge loss. Shidama Jinji, am I the only one who is worried that if the streamer attacks the north borderline in the future, how will the horse plague be solved? Jiang Pengji glanced at the bullet screen of the live stream. The secret messenger had already left. She seemed to be daydreaming, but in fact, she was sending a bullet screen in the live stream room. Streamer V, after listening to the secret messenger's report, I can more or less guess how the horse plague spread. It is most likely related to mosquitoes and insects. The source of the horse plague came from near Shalan. The climate there was humid and hot. There was no frost or snow in 4 seasons, and it was mostly spring or summer. If mosquitoes and insects were the source of transmission, then when the weather turned completely cold and snow covered the earth, the horse plague would naturally be suppressed. There were only a few ways for the source of transmission. After Jiang Pengji ruled out all the ways of transmission, she targeted the mosquitoes and insects that were more common on the grasslands. Although there was no conclusive evidence for this guess, she trusted her own judgment more. If it was airborne, even if the source of the disease had a very long incubation period, the horse plague would be concentrated in a few days and spread throughout the grasslands of the north borderline. The results proved that this was not the case. The horse plague spread in all directions in the form of radiation infection. The speed of transmission was not fast, but it was not slow either. The audience in the live stream room suddenly realized something. Scarlet Starry Sky, I feel that this horse plague is a bit like the African horse plague, but the incubation period is longer and the fatality rate is higher. Heroes of the storm, anyway, it's good that the streamer knows what to do. We'd better watch the show quietly. At that moment, an audience member suddenly raised a question. Nuanling, I suddenly thought of something. Little White also came from the north borderline. Could there be a source of the horse plague? Everyone was anxious at the thought of such a handsome and well-behaved star horse suddenly dying. Streamer V, Little White is in good condition. It's fine. The manager of the treasure house told Jiang Pengji that he had bought a snow-white fine warhorse and wanted to present it to her. At that time, Jiang Pengji carefully inquired about some details. After making sure that Little White was fine, she asked the groom to throw Little White into White's VIP stable. The manager of the treasure house left the north borderline with Little White. He deliberately took a detour to reach Xiangyang district, which took more than a month. If Little White was sick, he would have died on the way. How could he reach Xiangyang district safely? There were burning straws everywhere in the fields. Jiang Pengji got up and put on her wooden clogs. At that moment, Li Yun also returned from his patrol. There was a simple smile on his face, which attracted the attention of many young ladies. My lord, Jiang Pengji nodded, indicating that it was time to leave. Li Yun was so happy that he showed his white teeth. I thought there would be no harvest due to the drought this year. I didn't expect it to be a year with a small bumper harvest. He checked the harvesting situation of each household's fields. The food was enough to feed the people of Fengyi County. Chapter 583. It's a small harvest. We should go back and celebrate. The way to celebrate was nothing more than gathering to eat barbecued meat or hot pot. The guest house had already opened branches in the other 3 counties, but the people there had just settled down and business was slow. The guest house in Xiangyang district was full. The weather was getting colder by the day, so the guest house launched a hot pot and barbecue series that was very popular. The people only cared about food, clothing, 4 dishes, and soup, but Jiang Pengji and the others had to consider more far-reaching things. For example, how should they conquer Wanzhou next year? Wanzhou consisted of Fengyi County, Qingde County, and Shanyang County. All 4 counties of Fengyi County were in Jiang Pengji's hands. The imperial court could not protect itself and had no time to care about the north. The chief of Fengyi County had been rebuked by Jiang Pengji. He did not have the guts to ask her for Fengyi County. Qingde County was in the hands of the Red Lotus Group, but after the drought in summer, the situation there was also precarious. No matter how good the Red Lotus Group was at brainwashing, they could not stop the increasing number of refugees. The population loss in Fengyi County was extremely serious. Finally, there was Shanyang County. Speaking of Shenyang County, Fengjin had to be mentioned because he was from there. Shangjing used to be a part of Shenyang County. Before Dongqing established its capital, Shangjing also belonged to Shenyang County. Later, Dongqing moved its capital to Qinzhou, so Shangjing naturally belonged to Shenyang County again. After experiencing the earthquake last summer, the north suffered heavy losses and was continuously ravaged by the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus Group. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a living hell with starving people everywhere. The roadside was littered with bones and it was unbearable to look at them. Qingde County is controlled by the Red Lotus Group. Shenyang County has yet to fall into the hands of any party. After all, the Feng family was one of the four noble families of Dongqing. Naturally, they had troops. They did not have many people, but there were 3,000 to 4,000 of them. Their combat power was considerable. Coupled with their local reputation, when the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus Group were plundering everywhere, the Feng family had already thought of ways to mobilize the people to defend the city. They had money, food, and resources. The Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus Group did not see eye to eye. They held each other back. In the end, none of them had a way to conquer Shenyang County. Now, although the people in Shenyang County were living hard, their situation was much better than the refugees outside. Yang Si glanced at Fengjin and said, "Is my lord planning to attack Shenyang County?" After he finished speaking, Fengjin's brows furrowed imperceptibly, as if he disagreed. Jiang Pengji said, "Let's use peaceful means before resorting to force. We have to take it down eventually. Peaceful measures before resorting to violence?" This was really strange. Didn't His Majesty like to go to war at the slightest disagreement? Wei Ci was also in a meeting at the government office. He glanced at Fengjin. Jiang Pengji was willing to use peaceful means before resorting to force, mostly because she considered Fengjin's feelings. Fengjin looked at Fengjin with a faint smile and asked Jiang Pengji, "I wonder if my lord has a suitable candidate in mind?" Without waiting for Jiang Pengji to speak, Fengjin stepped forward and said, "Jin is willing to go to Shenyang County." Jiang Pengji nodded in agreement. There was indeed no one more suitable than Fengjin for this matter. If they could take down Shenyang County without fighting, that would be for the best. But if they couldn't get through talking, then they could only resort to violence. Her goal was Shenyang County, and she was determined to get it. If they could take down the entire territory of Wanzhou, it would be bordering Hu County, which was connected to Chongzhou. The Lu family's power would be able to help each other. If they could not take down Shenyang County, it would be equivalent to cutting off a tail. When the time came and they were outflanked, they would be in a passive position. Fengjin also knew the importance of this matter, so he had to think of a way to convince his father at home. Although the county chief of Shenyang County was not a member of the Feng family, he was not far from it. The Feng family's attitude could decide where Shenyang County would go. The power in the north of Dongqing was being reshuffled again. In the south, Prince Changsho and the emperor were also embroiled in a fierce battle. Prince Changsho originally thought that he could use the power of the three tribes of the northern borderline to completely conquer Qinzhou, but he didn't expect that the northern borderline, who had promised him, would suddenly stand him up. God knew how long Prince Changsho had been consoling himself before he agreed to the three tribes of the northern borderline. If they wanted women, cities, grains, gold, and silver, he endured his anger and disgust and agreed, but the three tribes of the northern borderline stood him up. I have a sentence, but I don't know if I should say it. When Prince Changsho received the news that the northern borderline had stood him up, he almost vomited blood. There was another matter that worried him even more. They came from Jianghu to attack Qinzhou, so along the way, there was a grain team that supplied them with rations. Prince Changsho had long had the intention to betray them, so he had made ample preparations for the war. But no matter how ample he was, he didn't expect Qinzhou to be able to hold out for a year and a half under the attack of his army. Qinzhou could obtain rations locally, but their army had to transport rations from Jianghu. Unfortunately, there was a drought this summer, and most of the crops had withered. The grains harvested in autumn were less than 30% of the previous year's. The people didn't even have enough for themselves, so how could they pay the heavy grain tax to supply the army? Therefore, Prince Changshuo's army was once again faced with a shortage of rations. The rations supplied by the grain team were getting lesser and lesser. In the past, the soldiers would split up twice or even thrice a day. Now, they split up once a day, and cooking rice became cooking porridge. If they still couldn't conquer Qinzhou, Prince Changshuo would have to bring his troops and scram back to his fief in Jianghu. When the emperor recovered and gathered Dongqing's troops to besiege Jianghu, it would be the day of Prince Changshuo's death. A group of strategists and generals were frowning. Prince Changshuo's temper was getting worse by the day. Everyone was frightened and jittery. No, this can't go on. Prince Changshuo hadn't slept for 2 days, and he had a pair of dark circles under his eyes. His hundreds of thousands of lions definitely had no problem in terms of combat power. If Yang Si hadn't tricked him before he left, he would already be sitting on the throne and being called, "Long live the Emperor." Why would he be worrying about rations in the military tent? Thinking of Yang Si, who was full of lies, Prince Changshuo gnashed his teeth in hatred. At first, he felt guilty towards Yang Si, but later, he realized that this person had caused such a huge trouble for him. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. The people in Qinzhou also discovered Prince Changshuo's predicament of a shortage of rations. They were both happy and worried. Happy? As long as they held out for a while, Prince Changshuo would have no choice but to retreat due to a shortage of rations. Worried? Not only was Prince Changshuo lacking rations, but there was also a shortage of rations in Qinzhou. Both sides were starving. Now, it was just a matter of who would give up first. If the stalemate continued, both sides could still grind it out, but someone had to interfere at this time. When he heard the news, Prince Changshuo was sitting in his tent and throwing a tantrum. A messenger came in from outside and he almost vented his anger on him. The messenger was chased out. The flattering middle-aged strategist was just about to see Prince Changshuo. When he saw the anxious messenger outside the tent, he couldn't help but ask. Then, his eyes lit up as he listened. He was so excited that he couldn't control himself. My lord is overjoyed." "What's the cause of the joy?" Prince Changshuo asked impatiently. Chapter 584. The Meng family of Zhangzhou. The 4 noble families of Dongqing were the Feng family of Shenyang, the Wang family of Langjie, the Xia family of Yuning, and the Meng family of Zhangzhou. The Feng family of Shenyang were mostly upright, and the number of troops they had was no more than 3,000 to 4,000. The Wang family of Langjie was also an upright and noble family. More than 10 years ago, they went into seclusion and disappeared without a trace. Their clansmen rarely showed themselves outside. The Xia family of Gongning were mostly talented in both literature and martial arts. They had been noble since the Xia dynasty. Only the Meng family of Zhangzhou held a large number of troops and was trusted by the emperor. The house of the Count of Jinbei had great merits and had been weakened by the Dongqing emperor using various methods to seize their military power. A few years ago, the house of the Count of Jinbei had led troops to aid the Nanxing kingdom. However, the military supervisor had a grudge against the house of the Count of Jinbei, resulting in heavy casualties among the troops. Today, the house of the Count of Jinbei had long fallen into dire straits. In order to stabilize the situation at the border, the emperor put the Meng family of Zhangzhou in an important position, which made the powerful Meng family of Zhangzhou even more arrogant and insufferably arrogant. How arrogant were they? A few years ago, when the people in Zhangzhou were in chaos, the emperor did not reprimand the Meng family. Instead, he allowed them to kill the rioters and fight violence with violence. Logically speaking, the Meng family of Zhangzhou should be the #1 confidant of the emperor. Why would they come here? Prince Changshuo used what was left of his brain to ponder for a while. The anger in his heart subsided slightly. He tidied up his appearance and sat on the seat of honor. "Hurry and welcome the emissary." The middle-aged strategist answered flatteringly. Not long after, the sound of clothes rubbing against each other could be heard from outside. The footsteps sounded a little hurried. The door curtain was lifted, and a man with an ordinary face walked in. He looked so ordinary that if he was thrown into a sea of people, he would be lost. His clothes were patched with many patches. Prince Changsho pretended to be deep in thought and put on airs for a while. After a while, he asked, "Tell me, what is the Meng family's motive?" As the saying goes, those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. After Prince Changsho was tricked by Yang Si, he would no longer easily believe the words of scholars. The Mengs of Tsangzhou were the confidants of the Emperor of Dongqing. All the children in Dongqing knew about this. Would Prince Changsho believe that the Meng family of Tsangzhou suddenly betrayed them? The Meng family's messenger bowed respectfully and said in a hoarse voice, "Your Highness, as the saying goes, an honest man does not resort to insinuations. I will not deliberately keep you in suspense. My master wishes to discuss the world affairs with Prince. I wonder if Prince is interested in sitting down and having a detailed discussion?" Prince Changsho's heart skipped a beat and a mocking look appeared on his face. Why were there always people in the world who treated him like a fool and deceived him? He said harshly, "Who in this world doesn't know that your master is my good second brother's loyal dog? Who would believe your words?" The Meng family's emissary's expression changed drastically. Nowadays, the aristocratic families were powerful. Even if the four noble families retired one after another, the entire political situation of Dongqing was still in the hands of the aristocratic families. The emperor and the royal family were more like puppets in the hands of the aristocratic families. Not only did Prince Changsho not treat him with courtesy, but he also called the Meng family the emperor's lackeys. It was infuriating. However, the Meng's emissary was here on a mission. Naturally, he would not fall out with them easily. His heart sank, and he said, "As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in, and a virtuous minister chooses a master to serve. My master wants to discuss important matters with your Highness, so he naturally thinks highly of you. The emperor is muddle-headed. Now, the northern borderline is watching covetously from the outside, and there are traitors inside who are causing trouble for the people. Instead of making progress, he indulges in sensual pleasures, killing loyal ministers, virtuous ministers, and good ministers, and allowing traitors to control the court. Such a muddle-headed person is definitely not the emperor." Prince Changsho sat at the seat of honor and listened. At first, he was a little careless, but as the Meng's emissary continued, he gradually became moved. Could it be that the Mengs of Tsangzhou were really planning to abandon darkness for light and help him ascend the throne? But why would the Mengs help him? It must be because he had something to gain from an aristocratic family that pursued fame and wealth. What Prince Changsho could give to the Mengs, could the emperor of Dongqing not? No matter how the people outside cursed the emperor for being muddle-headed and incompetent, he was still the legitimate emperor, while Prince Changsho was a traitor who wanted to force the emperor to abdicate and rebel in the name of purging the emperor. Or could it be that the Mengs of Tsangzhou were no longer as glorious as before, and wanted to seek merit to help the emperor? Prince Changsho's eyes flickered, and he was faintly moved. A straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. Your master isn't someone who likes to suffer losses. What benefits does he get by helping me overthrow the emperor? Merit to help the emperor? No matter how great the merit was, could it help the Mengs of Tsangzhou advance? The god of war, Meng Jing, was the ancestor of the Mengs. He paved the way for his descendants, allowing the Mengs to flourish until today. What kind of place was the stud farm that bred warhorses? It was a national treasure, but the emperor had handed the stud farm of Dongqing, Tsangzhou, to the Mengs. What kind of trust was that? What kind of glory was that? Even if the Mengs had merit to help the emperor, they couldn't advance further, unless Prince Changsho gave up the throne that he was about to obtain. Thinking of this, the joy in Prince Changsho's heart vanished, and he became even more vigilant against the emissary of the Mengs. The emissary of the Mengs said, "My master doesn't have any evil intentions. He just wants to help your Highness get back what belongs to you. Of course, if you're willing to give the heads of the Lus to my master after this is done, that would be the best." Prince Changsho was shocked. The heads of the Lus? The Mengs of Tsangzhou had turned to him, and their ultimate goal was to destroy the Lus? Did the Mengs and the Lus have a deep grudge against each other? The emissary said arrogantly, "It is the Lus of Hejin." Prince Changsho's heart was pounding, and he asked, "The Lus of Hejin? Do you mean the Lus of Chongzhou's magistrate Lu Shi?" The emissary asked in return, "Other than the Lus in Hejin, are there any other branches?" It looked like they were targeting Lu Shi and the others. Prince Changsho's heart settled, and he asked in confusion, "Your master is willing to help me because of the heads of the Lus? What did the Lus do to the Mengs of Tsangzhou that they had such a deep grudge against each other?" "Of course." The emissary maintained his arrogance. "If your highness doesn't believe me, you can pretend that this discussion never happened." In order to defend Shenzhou, the emperor of Dongqing borrowed troops from the Mengs of Tsangzhou and issued 19 edicts. The leader of the Mengs, Meng Zhan, agreed to send troops and transfer military power, but he had a condition. After defeating Prince Changsho, the imperial family had to pay with the heads of the Lus. Unfortunately, the emperor had an influential imperial noble consort Hui Jun by his side. The emperor tricked the Mengs' 20,000 troops into coming over, but he was vague about the Mengs' request. Meng Zhan then sent the emissary to make a deal with Prince Changsho. Prince Changsho's intuition told him that this was an opportunity for him to get close to the throne. However, he still wanted to know the grudge between the Mengs and the Lus. Only by understanding this could he judge the sincerity of the Mengs. It was a pity that the emissary refused to say anything. He was like a gourd with its mouth cut off, and his lips were tightly sealed. Prince Changsho could only agree on the surface to calm the emissary, and secretly send his subordinates to investigate the grudge between the two clans. Chapter 585. The Mengs and the Lus didn't have a grudge. Of course there was, and it was an irreconcilable grudge. When Meng Liang died, Meng Zhan saw him die. He vomited blood several times. After the funeral, he fell ill and was bedridden. When he finally recovered, he felt that Meng Liang's death was very strange. He knew Meng Hun very well. Even though he was promoted to the county military officer of Meng County, Meng Hun never changed. He was honest and didn't have the ability to set up a trap, not to mention provoking him several times with the word bitch in his words. Not only that, but the ambush also required a lot of manpower. When Meng Hun escaped from Meng County, he brought a lot of people with him, but they were all defeated soldiers. Along the way, some died and some were injured. How could they have the ability to annihilate the elites of the Meng family? When Meng Zhan was recuperating, he thought it was not that simple. There must be a mastermind behind Meng Hun. Just as he recovered from his illness, he sent someone to Hejin County to investigate carefully. But Meng County in Sang Prefecture was very far from Hejin County. It was too slow to send information back and forth every month. By the time Meng Zhan shifted his suspicion to Lu Shi had already become the general evaluation officer in Shangjing. He had stepped down from his position as the county chief of Hu County and was promoted to the Chongzhou magistrate. Right after the evaluation ended, he immediately took up his post and went to the border of Dongqing. One in the south and the other in the north. What about Meng Hun? Meng Hun had already taken thousands of troops to Chongzhou to avoid trouble. He just missed the Meng spies. Meng Zhan wanted to attack the Lus to test Lu Shi's reaction. After all, he had no evidence to prove that Lu Shi was the culprit behind Meng Hun's murder. But the Lus in Hejin only had ordinary people. Most importantly, Lu Shi was in Chongzhou and his son was studying in Langjie County. Coincidentally, the emperor had suppressed the house of Count Jinbei. The empty military power needed a confidant. The Mengs became the best choice. It also diverted Meng Zhan's attention. Until half a year ago, Meng Zhan received news that there was a fierce general in Fengyi County named Meng Hun who led the army to attack Maolin County. Meng Hun? He wasn't dead. Meng Zhan acted as if he had been injected with chicken blood. He quickly sent people to investigate. It took a few days before he finally found something. Meng Hun was still the same Meng Hun. He used to be the commandant of Meng County, but now he was the commandant of Lu Shi's vanguard battalion. Who was Lu Shi? He was Lu Shi's only son. Who was Meng Hun? The culprit who killed Meng Liang, toyed with Zhangzhou, and swindled the grain. With the two of them together, Meng Zhan didn't need any evidence to conclude that the culprit behind Meng Liang's murder was Lu Shi. It had been 4 or 5 years, and he could not forget his son's murder. Whenever he thought of his precious son being bled to death and his corpse lying in a cold coffin, he could not let go of his hatred. Although he and Lu Shi had an affair, how could he be so cruel as to kill Meng Liang? Meng Liang was as important to Meng Zhan as Lu Shi was to Lu Shi. The hatred of his son's murder was absolutely irreconcilable. Meng Zhan originally wanted to stay away from the war between the emperor and Prince Changshou, but now he wanted to get involved. He wanted to use this as a bargaining chip to help one side win the war. Then he could attack Lu Shi's entire family. Who knew that the emperor would secretly be bewitched by the concubine even though he had promised? Meng Zhan had no choice but to change his target. He gave up on the emperor and turned to work with Prince Changshou. Lu Shi killed his son, so he wanted to destroy the entire Lu family. The innocent Lu Shi took the blame for Jiangpengji. But the Mengs were not the only ones who were harmed by Jiangpengji. Far away in the northern borderline, another storm was brewing. The king of the imperial court was the king of the northern borderline. He had killed his way out of the ordinary royal family and became the king of the northern borderline. He had some tricks up his sleeve. The loss of the horse farm could not be recovered. The large number of dead horses was heart-wrenching. But the most important thing now was to find a way to stabilize the situation and reduce the losses of the tribes and herdsmen. When it came to making up for the losses, money was a must. When it came to money, the managers of the northern borderline all turned pale. In order to resist the foreign merchants and protect the interests of the northern borderline, the king of the imperial court, under the advice of the wise man, Wu Liba, formed a business alliance. It not only helped each other but also increased the competitiveness of local businesses. However, there were benefits to an alliance of merchant companies, and naturally, there were certain disadvantages. They saw the value of the colored glass of the heavenly palace. After observing for a while, they united and annexed the stock of Gu Xian's treasure house. They were ready to learn from Gu Xian's methods of waiting to be valued and hunger marketing. They wanted to maximize the rarity of the colored glass of the heavenly palace. But before they could make much money, the horse plague broke out. Then, there was the tragic death of the horses and the loss of the horse farm. Now, they needed real money to make up for the losses. They were shocked to find that the gold, silver, and copper coins they had were less than a quarter of what they usually had. The northern borderline was indeed rich, but most of their money came from various shops, horse farms, war horses, stallions, pony caravans, and precious goods. If these things were converted into gold, silver, and jewelry, the northern borderline's business would be as rich as a country. But when it came to real money, clap, 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 where's the money? Did someone embezzle it? The head manager slammed the table. He was so angry that his beard was about to fly off. The junior manager trembled and stammered, "I wouldn't dare to do that even if I had 10 guts." The head manager was so angry that he snatched the accounts from the other party and read them quickly. The accounts were all correct, but where did the money of their business go? Reading to the end, the head manager's face turned green and he said helplessly, "Think of a way to sell the colored glass of the heavenly palace." The junior manager hurriedly said, "But," the head manager interrupted him, "No buts. The most important thing now is to take out a sum of money. The people at the top need it." Everyone knew that the colored glass of the heavenly palace was extremely precious. Gold and precious stones didn't dare to compete with it. In a few years, it might be even more expensive. After all, they had cheated Gu Xian at 30% of the price. Even if they sold it at the original market price, they would still make a profit. Not only would they not lose money, but they could also make a lot of money. Everyone knew the reason, but they didn't have enough time. They couldn't wait. They had no choice but to sell the colored glass of the heavenly palace in exchange for real money. At this time, they discovered a very embarrassing thing. Most of the ladies in the northern borderline were of noble birth. Most of the businesses were run by these ladies' maiden families. When they bought the colored glass of the heavenly palace, they didn't give them gold, silver, or jewelry at all. Instead, they recorded it, owed it, took it directly. What's more, they said they were buying it with money, but they directly used the business's money to pay for it. What was the difference between this and putting money in one's left pocket into one's right pocket? Among them, Wu Liba's wife was the most generous. She bought 10 sets of jewelry in one go. However, the business didn't get a single cent. Instead, they got a stack of promissory notes. Chapter 586. What should we do? Seeing the priceless, colored glass of the heavenly palace sold one set after another, but the amount of money they got back was very little. The loophole in the accounts was getting bigger and bigger. The junior manager almost wanted to cry but had no tears. Who didn't know what those rich ladies were like? The merchant alliance was half public and half private. However, to these noble ladies who came from powerful families, it was completely their private property. They would just give some money or write an IOU, which was considered polite. If they didn't stand on ceremony, they would directly ask for it. With the items in the hands of these women, the junior manager didn't even need to think to know that those IOUs couldn't be turned into money. The little steward was extremely worried and told this matter to the chief steward. The chief manager was also full of lawsuits and was in a dilemma. His sister also bought a few sets of colored glass of the heavenly palace on credit. He secretly told his sister about it, but she didn't care at all. The chief manager couldn't do anything about it. The rich ladies of the northern borderline were favored. Even if they were married, they still had a high status in their family. These women didn't hesitate to spend money and were even more diligent in taking their own things. The financial loophole of the business was getting bigger and bigger. The junior manager was so worried that his hair was about to turn white. He muttered and complained, "These women are willing to pay for gu xian. I've never seen them write IOUs in the past. Why are they all taking it for free now? They're really not polite," the chief manager said impatiently. Gu Xian is a businessman from Dongqing. He does business according to the rule of cash and goods. You can't get the goods if you don't pay, but the business is the family of these women. When have you ever seen the Chow family pay their bills properly? The junior manager shrank his neck and said in horror, "But this isn't a solution. If the colored glass of the heavenly palace was divided up by these rich ladies, the business would have to pay a large sum of money. If this financial loophole wasn't closed, when the higher-ups checked the accounts, no one could afford to bear the consequences." With no other choice, the chief manager could only think of a solution that wasn't really a solution. On the surface, they said that the colored glass of the heavenly palace had been sold out, but in private, they sold it at a lower price than the average price to a noblewoman of a slightly lower status. These noblewomen all had one thing in common: their maiden families were not involved in the business, or their status in the business was not high. Even though they were selling at a low price, the price they set was still more than double the original price of the purchase. There were many rich ladies in the northern borderline. In the past, the colored glass of the heavenly palace was almost monopolized by the first-class ladies. Others couldn't buy it even if they wanted to. But now, there was illegal goods delivered to their doorstep. The price was also reasonable, far lower than the highest value in their hearts, so they bought it with a wave of their hands. Thus, the firm successfully sold a batch of colored glass of the heavenly palace and made a lot of money every day. If everything went smoothly, when all the inventory was sold, the financial hole could be closed. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to one's wishes. Just as the situation was looking good, something happened to the prodigal woman at home. It all started at a banquet. The azure glass of the heavenly palace had almost become the standard for the high-class ladies of the northern borderline. It symbolized great wealth and power. Every time they went out to meet guests, they had to wear a set. When they found out that the firm also had a lot of colored glass of the heavenly palace, they couldn't contain their joy and changed a set every day. This banquet was no exception. The three tribes of the northern borderline had a strict racial division. There was a clear hierarchy among them, and no one was allowed to overstep their authority. Wu Liba's wife was undoubtedly the cream of the crop among all the ladies. As the first lady, what she hated the most were those pretentious Central Plains women and those female slaves who used their looks to please others. No one would have thought that she would disregard her bearing and directly scratch the beautiful face of a certain noble's beloved concubine. The concubine was originally sitting in a remote corner talking to someone. When Wu Liba's wife came up to hit her, she didn't even react. Who let a lowly female slave wear the colored glass of the heavenly palace? With a body of lowly flesh, do you think you deserve it? Wu Liba's wife grabbed all the jewelry off the concubine's head and ruthlessly threw them on the ground. Glass shards fell all over the ground, and those who were close by were even bounced off. They were so frightened that they subconsciously distanced themselves. After hearing Wu Liba's wife's words, the ladies finally understood what had happened. A female slave's concubine actually dared to wear the same precious, colored glass of the heavenly palace as them? The ladies were furious, but Wu Liba's wife had already gone forward to whip someone, so they didn't interfere. The concubine was also beaten senseless. Wu Liba's wife grabbed her long hair and pressed her to the ground. Her tender face was pressed against the ground, and beads of blood appeared. She was filled with regret. If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have worn that precious headgear to show off. Who knew that the women of the northern borderline would be so shrewish and unreasonable? They even dared to hit someone at a banquet hosted by the eldest princess. The one who did it was Wu Liba's wife. Her maiden family was powerful, and her husband's family was extremely powerful. This matter was easily brushed off. As for the concubine who was violently beaten, she was really sorry. She was beaten for no reason, and the concubine's husband didn't even say anything. However, this matter didn't end so easily. How could the group of ladies let it go? How could a female slave's concubine have the wealth to wear the expensive, colored glass of the heavenly palace? Especially the wife of the concubine's husband. When she returned home, she almost flipped the whole house upside down. After investigating, they found out that the colored glass of the heavenly palace was sold at half the normal price, and all of them were sold by the trading company. At this moment, the ladies were completely in an uproar. The business that had just taken a turn for the better was instantly cut off again. The chief steward of the trading company was so angry that his teeth itched. Helpless, they could only find another way out. They prepared to sell the colored glass of the heavenly palace to Dongqing. The business in the northern borderline could no longer continue. However, this year, the northern borderline seemed to be unlucky. The trading company had just negotiated a deal, but the traffickers who smuggled it to Dongqing refused to do it. Business has business principles. To go back on one's word like this, the chief steward resisted the urge to vomit blood and patiently negotiated with his business partner. The other party laughed coldly and said mockingly, "The merchants in the northern borderline often mock the merchants in the Central Plains for being scheming and dishonest in doing business. They boast that they believe in business, but from what I can see, it doesn't seem like much. This so-called colored glass of the heavenly palace is just a cheap item made of gravel. If I hadn't received the news in time, by the time this deal was done, my family would have been forced into a desperate situation." What? A cheap item made of gravel? The chief steward was flustered and exasperated. The colored glass of the heavenly palace, in his hands, was the real deal. The business deal fell through. The chief steward turned around and felt that something was amiss. He hurriedly sent someone to investigate the situation. The information he received made him dizzy and his brain went blank for a moment. His vision turned black. His brain felt heavy and he fell to the ground, unconscious. The so-called colored glass of the heavenly palace was just a very common glass product in Jianghu. Chapter 587. The head steward fainted from anger. Little did he know that Gu Xian also wanted to explode on the spot. He knelt in front of Jiang Pengji, his eyes filled with guilt. He carried a thorn branch on his back and asked for her forgiveness. Jiang Pengji forcefully helped him up. Her expression was the same as usual. Uncle Gu, what are you doing? Get up, do you want to shorten my lifespan? Gu Xian seemed to have aged a lot overnight. He could not dissuade Jiang Pengji and could only sit down with a face full of guilt. Feng Jin and the rest were all present. Most of them had seen Gu Xian before and knew how much he had contributed to Xiangyang County. They were very respectful towards him. Mr. Gu, what happened on the road? Why are you? He immediately offered a humble apology. It was as if he hadn't washed himself for many days. He looked extremely disheveled. Where was his calm demeanor from before? Gu Xian replied, your servant has failed to live up to Master's trust and carelessly messed up the task that Master has entrusted me with. Messed up? Jiang Pengji furrowed her brows and asked in a deep voice, Uncle Gu, what happened? Gu Xian furrowed his brows and said, according to the Master's instructions, I brought all kinds of colored glass objects to Zhongzhou to seek new business. At first, it was still all right, but after a while, it was as if a demonic wind was blowing in Zhongzhou. Glass of all colors filled the streets. Initially, it was sold at an extremely high price, but because there were too many merchants selling it, the price dropped from tens of thousands of coins to a few hundred coins. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. Su Ku was so shocked that he bit his tongue. Didn't Fengyi County rely on the rare glass to have such a large fortune? Now that the price of the glass had dropped from tens of thousands of coins to a few hundred coins, and it seemed like the price would continue to drop, they wouldn't be able to make any profit. Su Ku was in charge of Jiang Pengji's private treasury, so he was the clearest about it. The others also knew that Fengyi County was so rich that it could not be separated from glass. The viewers in the live broadcast room were in an uproar. According to Gu Xian's description, there was something fishy going on here. Little Angel is the cutest, what the F***ck, what kind of strategy is this? 520, #picknose. What else could it be? There must be a traitor. So far, only the streamer here has perfected the art of making glass. Zhongzhou is far away. How could they have such a tacit understanding and come up with so many glass products? I love you, a traitor. However, as you can see, the host is very protective of the glass manufacturing technology. Inside and outside, it was completely covered. The host also had a pair of fiery eyes. They had been buying glass for a whole year. How did the secret get leaked? Jintian Shuanggang, it's highly possible that there's a traitor, but I think it's more likely that there's another woman from another world. As you can see, it's Zhongzhou again. The 4 self-accomplishment classics for women appeared before Zhongzhou. It was exactly the same as the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women in ancient China. Now, there was glass. If you say that there are no traces of a transmigrated woman, I wouldn't believe it even if you beat me to death. Gui Kai Gua Feng Shao, based on Jia's analysis, other than the traitor and the time traveler, there is another unlikely possibility. Perhaps someone accidentally burned the pottery and got glass. However, the possibility of this happening was too low. Even if they managed to burn it, the technology wasn't that mature. In Yuejia Zhuge Qinma, to the one above, are you shameless? How dare you call yourself Jia? Why don't you call yourself F***ck? There was a lot of discussion in the streaming room. Not only were they curious about the truth behind the incident, but they were also worried about Jiang Pengji. Cutting off one's source of wealth was akin to killing one's parents. Jiang Pengji had relied on glass products to swindle more than 20 million strings of coins from the northern borderline. If not for this incident, she might have been able to swindle tens of millions of strings of coins from Zhongzhou. She wouldn't have to worry about money when she conquered the world in the future. Now that her source of wealth had been cut off, how could she not be angry? In reality, Jiang Pengji hadn't really shipped the goods. Compared to their loss of composure, she had a calm expression that said, "So that's how it is." She smiled and opened her mouth helplessly. Uncle Gu can't be blamed for this. Do you think that the method of making glass was leaked because of you? Gu Xian was astonished. Everyone present thought of a possibility, a traitor. Glass was too profitable. Who wouldn't be jealous? Burning a handful of sand could turn the situation around and earn tens of thousands of strings of coins. The profits were shocking. Gu Xian pondered who the traitor was while feeling extremely ashamed. There might be a traitor, but it shouldn't be her. Because the timing didn't match. Jianghu was very certain and didn't suspect it. Even though there was no evidence, she already understood what was going on. In this world, Jianghu wasn't the only one who had the ability to make glass. Her. Everyone looked at each other. Did the Lord mean that she already knew there was a traitor, but she pretended not to know? Then my lord, without the glass business, what should they do? It doesn't matter. From this, we can see how stupid the person behind this is. What's there to be afraid of? Jianghu smiled contemptuously. She didn't take the so-called enemy seriously at all. Gu Xian was a merchant. He calmed down and thought about the overflowing glass in Zhongzhou. He couldn't help but shake his head. It was indeed stupid. The owner is right. Glass is cheap, but it's expensive when it's rare. Few people in the world know how it's made. If the production and sales are strictly controlled, even if there's only one kiln, one can easily become the richest person in the world. It's not a pipe dream to be rich enough to rival a country. That person is short-sighted and didn't protect the method of making glass. Instead, the kiln is overflowing. It's really stupid. Gu Xian witnessed with his own eyes the price of glass in Zhongzhou plummet from tens of thousands of strings of coins. One could imagine that the person who made the first kiln also wanted to make money, but he didn't have the foresight and didn't know the greedy nature of merchants. Such a huge profit was enough for people to gamble with their lives. It was also because of the profit that the glass in Zhongzhou was overflowing. Fortunately, Gu Xian saw that the situation wasn't good. He sold all the glass in his hands at a price lower than the market price and hurried back to Xiangyang district with the money. Don't be fooled by his sorry state. In fact, he earned more than 3 million strings of coins. He specialized in cheating the big merchants of Zhongzhou. Compared to a merchant boss like Gu Xian, how could those opportunistic merchants be a match for him? Gu Xian saw that the situation wasn't good, so he sold and left. He earned the last sum of money. The merchant who took over thought that he had made a fortune, but he was stunned when he turned around. Su Ku and the rest looked at Jianghu with admiration. They asked themselves honestly. If their source of wealth was forcefully cut off, they wouldn't just faint, but they would be furious. Their lord was good. She was calm and composed and even had the time to mock the enemy behind her. But my lord, if you lose this source of wealth, as the housekeeper, Su Ku felt the most heartache. It doesn't matter. Anyway, the private treasury has enough money. If the public treasury lacks it, just claim it. There wasn't much money in the public treasury. She had always used her private purse to replenish it. Jianghu said with a smile, on the contrary, Zhongzhou, after this torment, I'm afraid it's going to run out of luck. The whole nation's kiln was frantically trying to make money. The more glass there was, the lower the price. The first to eat the cake would earn a lot, but those who followed the trend would be out of luck. The situation in Zhongzhou was already unstable. The chaos caused by the clique was brutal. The lives of the people were getting more and more difficult. Many people saw glass as a good way to get rich and escape poverty. Naturally, they would madly follow the trend. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.